Hello, hello, hello. I am now live, I believe. So, welcome everybody. Whether you are joining me here tonight or you're going to be watching this back on playback, thank you so much for being here. I'm going to, as you guys kind of join in here and say hello in the comments, I will tell you the little story of like how this ended up happening, but I have been thinking a lot about like making a new video, and I sat down to make the book mid-year book freakout tag, and I was like, I don't know, like mental block. I didn't want to do it, so I was like, what if I do it live? So here we are. Hi everyone. Hello. Thank you for being here. Hello. Oh, so many friends. Hi Crystal. Hi Rachel. Hello, hello. I'm so glad to have you all here. So I figured what we would do is that we would go through the mid-year book freakout tag together, and I would tell you guys my answers and talk a little bit about my answers. But then, you guys can share your picks for me. So things like favorite book of the year so far, least favorite, something that's on your TBR you haven't read yet, something you're looking forward to in the second half of the year. I've been doing live shows once a month over on TikTok. But I know not everybody's on TikTok, and you can't always catch when they are. So I was like, what if I try on YouTube again? It's been a little while since I did one of these. So hello, welcome again. Thank you for being here. And I think we're just going to dive right in. So, first question in the mid-year book freakout tag is, what is the best book that you've read so far this year? And for me, it is a book that I read back in January, and that is How the Word is Passed by Clint Smith. This is a nonfiction book. It is the subtitle there is like a reckoning with the history of slavery in the United States. So um hello. Yes, I saw, sorry, interrupting myself, but there's so many people that tell me this, that they're not on TikTok anymore. And I know that I'm primarily making content over there these days. So I'm like thinking about how to be a little bit better balanced and whatnot. So that's kind of how this live show came about. But yes, anyways, back to best book of the year. How the Word is Passed. This is nonfiction. It is a group of like stories about specific places. There's like one, visit plantations. There's some about Central Park. You visit a jail, and it kind of goes through like the narrative of like the tie of that place in history to slavery. And it's just so incredibly well done. Even if you're not into nonfiction, I feel like this is a good one to even recommend to not nonfiction readers, because it is story driven, it is narrative driven. He interviews a lot of people, and so there are stories within stories. And Clint Smith is a poet, and you can just tell the language is beautiful. It's touching. It's smart. I absolutely love it. I have a feeling that I'm gonna get to the end of this year, and this might be like my best book of the entire year, but we'll see. So far in the first half of the year, it was like pretty easy winner. You guys tell me, what was the best book you've read so far in 2023? I've had like I've read a lot of books this year, but I've been in a weird reading mood, and now this has been going on for like a couple of years. So I've done a lot of rereading. I've read a lot of like 3-star books. Uh, so like quality wise, it wasn't like the best first half of the year. Quantity wise, I think I read something like 70 books. So I've been reading a lot. And that all said, like How the Word is Passed really surpassed everything that I've read so far this year. So other people's favorites, we have Kaiki and The Blood Trials. I haven't read either of those. She Who Became the Sun. I started reading that last year, and I ran out of time because I went to Worldcon, and I was trying to read all of the Hugo nominated novels. And I have always meant to go back and finish it. But when you stop something in the middle, it gets a little hard to like pick it back up. That's kind of where I am with She Who Became the Sun. But I feel like I'm definitely going to go back and finish it. And yes, I am excited for the sequel as well. The Changeling by Victor LaVale. Interesting. I've never read anything by Victor LaVale, but I do have Lone Woman on my TBR. So Lakewood. Yay, picked it up because one of my videos, I was just talking about Lakewood in my Discord, trying to sell it to people. And I was like, listen, it's weird and the ending is open and you just got to go with me on this one. But I really, really, I think about that book all the time. I think about it more and like I like it more even than when I finished it. So I'm glad that you enjoyed. It's kind of a weird word to use with that book, but I'm glad that you appreciated it. Little Devil in America. Yes. And Transcendent Kingdom for fiction. Bandit Queen. The Spirit Cuts Through Water is on my TBR. I put it like I got a hold from the library, and I think the hold was something ridiculous. Like you'll see it next year. So I have not read it yet, but it is on my TBR. The Adventures of Amina Al-Sarafi. I don't know. Again, two times. I don't know if this is on my TBR. I don't know. I feel like people have heard it, but I haven't heard too much about the book itself. So we'll see. Crow Lake. Dark Matter. I haven't read anything by this author. Yes, Spirit Cuts Through Water again and The Weight of Blood. I haven't read it. I think that's Tiffany D. Jackson, if I'm not mistaken. I've not read anything from her either. Know what either What My Bones Know by Stephanie Fu or Rereading the Book Thief. Interesting. I have not read either of those. The Last Tale of the Flower Bride. Comfort Me with Apples is on my TBR. I read everything that Catherine M. Valenti puts out, so I haven't read this one yet. How spooky is it? Like, you guys know I'm a big chicken, but like, do I need to read this like daytime with the lights on? Just let me know. Nothing But the Rain, Perhaps the Stars. Yeah, Fourth Wing will be on this list. You can guess where it will show up. Crying in H Mart is also one that I haven't read yet, but I'm like, when am I going to be ready to cry? You know what I mean? Like, when am I going to be ready to have my heart broken? I don't know. I loved The Space Between Worlds. I just had such a romp. Like it was such a romp. I had such a good time with it. Not It's not like a five-star book to me. I think that there are like I understand why people like the nitpicks that people have, but also I just had such a good time with that book. It just flew by. Encyclopedia of Fairies and the Brothers York for nonfiction. Two more I have not read yet. This is good recommendations. The Blue Castle, Our Share of Night. The first Innkeeper book, Because of You, and it was really interesting. The World is a Different Take on Vampires and Werewolves. I have not actually read the Innkeeper books yet, but some Ilona Andrews books will be on this list. Our Wives Under the Sea, The Lives of Puppets. It's 3 out of 10 spooky. Okay, I can do that. Unsettling, but not very scary. Okay. Yes, don't read it. Comfort Beam with Apples isn't very good. I don't know. I don't know. I even like the things that I liked the least from Catherine M. Valenti, which to me was space opera. I still gave like 3 stars. I just love her writing, so I try it all. I will read it. Uh, Crying in H Mart is so good for a cry. Yes. Loved Comfort Me with Apples. It was one of my favorites last year. Good ride. All right. So we made it. I caught up with the comments so I can move on to the next one, which is best sequel. Oh yeah, here it is. Ilona Andrews. So to be fair, I have not read a ton of like series this year. I mean, I've been reading a lot in series, but they've been rereads. Like I'm rereading the Kate Daniels series with my Discord. I've been rereading Mercy Thompson because I'm going to do like a deep dive into those books because man, she gets so many things so wrong. But I love the main character, so I've been rereading those. So really, the only thing I read that was a sequel that was like a new read was in the Legacies series. I finished Kate Daniels for the first time last year, so I was like, okay, I'll move on to another series by Alona Andrews, and I started Hidden Legacies. And I didn't super love, like, 3 stars, the first one. I can't remember what the Burn for Me, I think it's called. I had a few issues with it. I feel like the plot in it was a lot like messier than anything that you find in Kate Daniels. And I found Nevada kind of annoying in the beginning because she was just like really thirsting after this guy in a way that wasn't like my super favorite kind of dynamic in a relationship. So I was like fine with it, but didn't super love it. But I think books 2 and 3 are better. I think that the relationship kind of settles down. I think the characters settle down. I love the family in the series so much. So that becomes like a highlight. So in general, I would give these like 3.5 stars, which Kate Daniels also starts in that like 3.5 star range, 3.5. And then as we get later on, they get stronger to me. I think that they're in the like 4.5 star range. So I don't know. I'm going to keep, there's like a first trilogy with Nevada, and I think there are some additional books with the other sister whose name I'm blanking on. So I will keep reading all of these. And then from here, I'll go to the Innkeeper Chronicles. Um, yes. Big best sequel is a cheat because it's not a sequel, but it's Existing Universe. Translation State by Anne Leckie. Soul Star by C.L. Polk was my best sequel. It was a fantastic end to the Kingston cycle. I read my first C.L. Polk this year, and it was the novella. Even though I knew the end, and I really, really enjoyed it. I really liked it. So it has put C.L. Polk definitely on my radar. I want to read more from them. The Obsolete Gate. I read 5th season years ago and I never kept going. And it's now to the point where I have to reread 5th season in order to finish the series. But again, when am I going to be in the mood to absolutely break my heart? I don't know. Uh, Amari and the Great Game for best sequel. That's amazing. I loved the first Amari book, but I haven't kept going. So I really, really enjoyed the first one. So far is the Poppy War, so it would be that. I'm not going to read the Poppy War, I've decided. I've read Babel, and my issues with the author are like characters and characterization. So I feel like I'm willing to try another standalone from R.F. Kuang, but not a trilogy. I'm not gonna invest in a trilogy. I'm already so bad at series, so I'm not even gonna try myself. So A Prayer for the Crown Shy. Let's see. Best sequel, A Restless Truth, and the Last Binding trilogy. Interesting. Soul Star is incredible, narrated by Robin Miles. I love Robin Miles. The only series I've read this year is Rick Riordan's House of Heroes. Son of Neptune is my favorite, I think. I read the first book in that. What's the beginning? You know what? That's how much I know about Rick Riordan. The Lightning Thief. The Lightning Thief. I read it when I was an adult though, and I was like, that was fine. And then I never kept reading. So I'm sorry to all of the fans out there. I'm sure that they also get better as they go, but I was just, I don't know. I was like, okay, cute, and I just like never went back. Best sequels are probably Harrow and Nona the Ninth. I know. I have to make time for all of the Broken Earth. I know. I know I'm going to love it because I loved the first book. Yes, when I have the spoons for it, for sure. I think Hidden Legacy suffers from a lack of an overarching story. So the plots of the individual books become kind of messy and distracting. I agree. I think, and like, there isn't enough interest in each individual story plot to like drive things. Like, I would be in the middle of the book and being like, okay, wait, what are they investigating again? Because it felt like so, I don't know, um, meaningless almost to like what was happening around it. It often felt like pretty messy and difficult to track. I think it did need sort of like better bones across the entire series to really make it matter. What's interesting though is that Hidden Legacy is more romance led. It's like more romance first than Kate Daniels, and I think that I mean, that's not like inherently a bad or good thing, but I think that as they're focusing so much on like the dynamic and the romance, what loses is kind of like the mystery core or whatever investigation that they're doing. So, a manga series. Let's see. My best book was a final book, perhaps the stars again. uh, our Dogman and the Bad Guys books. I love Dogman. Oh, yes. Robin Miles also does narrate Broken Earth. I remember from fifth season. Uh, All right. I think that brings us to the end of Best Sequel. So next we move on to, okay, so this was a release from this year that I have not read yet. And for me, that I want to read. And for me, that is Yellowface. I kind of already brought up Kwong. And so I read Babel at the end of last year and I gave it like 3.5 stars. It was one of those things where I like appreciated the project of what was happening, but I don't think it was actually done in a very good story. I think that there were weaknesses when it came to characterizations and plotting and pacing of the plot. I think, there were moments where for me personally, those things are kind of general, but then also just like for me personally as a reader and as somebody who has experienced racism, there are also moments where things were not the racism itself, but sort of the message that was trying to get like put across was a little ham-fisted in a way that I was like, I don't know that this story is for me. So that combined with like the weakness of the story itself kind of put me in that like middle ground of like, I get it. And I don't think it was done like exceptionally well, and also part of this was like not for me. So all of that kind of together, I already said I'm not going to go back and read the Poppy War. I just am not going to invest in a series from this author, but I will continue to try her standalones because the project at the heart of it is always something and I'm like, yeah, that sounds really interesting. So I'm curious. I've heard really mixed reviews. My Discord seems to really enjoy it. People have like really like it is uncomfortable, I guess, from what they are reporting back, but in a way that is effective and it's like what it's supposed to be. I have heard from people that are like, no, it was terrible. She still didn't like kind of stick the landing and whatnot. So I'm very curious how it will land for me, particularly because this is a satire and I feel like maybe some of the issues that I had with Babel would like be better in a satire. So this is still my TBR. I'm definitely going to read it eventually at some point. If you guys have read Yellowface, let me know what you guys think. Let's see. Yeah, I think you'll like Yellowface a lot better than Babel. Um, Witch King is also on my TBR. I actually have a copy that was sent to me by the publisher. So it's like I need to read that as well. Shin Gang All Stars for someone. Also Yellowface for me and Stone Blind. Page Boy by Elliot Page. And Island Princess Starts a Scandal. Is that the Adriana Herrera book? I think that might be like a second in sort of a related romance series. Am I thinking about the right one? I have the first one and I have never read it, but I will eventually as well. Unnatural Ends. How Far the Light Reaches is on my list somewhere. So uh, I will spoil a little and say it's so beautiful. Definitely check out the content warnings because it also can be very heavy, but also like so full of wonder. So we'll talk a little bit more about that one down the line. Yes, also another one for The Witch King. I like Yellow Face, but from what you said, not sure that you'll like it. See, I'm so worried. This is why I'm sticking to her standalones. At least it's just one. Lost Places, a queer speculative short fiction collection. Her last collection was my favorite book last year. Interesting. I always look for like at least one or two short story collections to read every year. So Lost Places sounds pretty cool. I just finished Yellowface today, so probably Tress of the Emerald Sea. I'm a little bit curious. I I've read one Brandon Sanderson and it was Mistborn and I really didn't like it. I'm not over it to a place like people are like, that's a bad place to start. It's his debut or whatever. But I'm also like not over it enough to like want to give Brandon Sanderson another try. And I also super don't want to give that man any money and support him monetarily. So I'm like in a really weird place with like, do I ever try Brandon Sanderson again? And for a while, I was like, maybe I'll try with like Tress of the Emerald Sea, because it's like a standalone and I think it's related, but like you can read it alone. But anytime I really think about reading Brandon Sanderson again, my brain goes, no. So maybe it's just a no. The Shape of Dragon's Breath is also on my TBR. I'm trying, I have an idea for uh, Fourth Wing left me kind of in the mood to read better dragon books. So I have like a TBR of them and a bunch out from the library. I brought one home from BookNet Fest. Caitlin gave this one to me, Heartstone. She said it's like Pride and Prejudice, but with dragons. So she passed that one along to me. So I've got a bunch of dragon books on my TBR to read, and this one is on there as well. Dear Medusa, I loved Babel, but I definitely hear the criticisms. Yes, Lone Women is also on my TBR. It was one of my book of the month picks, and I've been so bad about reading my book of the months this year. Young Mungo. I think R.F. Kuang is great at writing academic adjacent type books, but her characters are truly where it flops. I 100% agree. I think that again, yes, her strengths are not in like fiction, like the mechanics of writing a piece of fiction, but she keeps writing fiction. And so it's really hard because like the themes are there and like the work, like the research is there, but like all of the pieces of the actual book, like characters and plot and pace, are not there. Uh so yeah. I'm mid yellow face at the moment. I'm enjoying it, but don't love it. I'll recommend it to a lot of people that I think will love it. Interesting. I loved Witch King. If you don't expect fantasy murder bot, I think you'll like it too. Interesting, because I've had heard mixed things about it. So good to know to like set my expectations of like no fantasy murder bot. Big Swiss. I saw the page count of Babel and noped the F out. Fair. The beginning of it read pretty quickly to me, and then the middle of it just like dragged on forever. There were times we were like sitting in whole ass like lectures at this place, and like the information that was coming was like interesting, but also I'm sitting in the middle of a lecture in the middle of a book that was like chonky. So I was like, oh my God, will this ever end? Hello, 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 friends. Um, Kelly Link has a new collection called White Cat, Black Dog. Interesting. Let's see. Everything you said about Babel is similar to what I felt about Yellowface. Hopefully, you'll like it better. I don't know. It's so mixed. Who can say? Uh, I'm one of the few people that landed on 3-star for the Poppy War series, but hearing people critique her characters amongst her books makes sense looking back. Yeah, I've heard Sam from Thoughts on Tomes talk about the characters specifically. Specifically, I heard her like mention how some of the character relationships felt very forced or like told and not shown, I think is what she said in her review. And that is 100% how I felt about the friendships in Babel, is that a lot of it was just like, and then they became friends, and then they would give their lives for each other, and then this. And it was kind of like, I'm not seeing it and I'm not feeling it. Sanderson feels like nerd homework. And you know what I hate? Homework. Brando Sando is a John Grisham of fantasy. Absolutely readable, but no spark of magic. You can't, but you say that, and people are like, no, he's the best. Which I totally get too, because it's like so, I don't know, foundational. A lot of people enter fantasy through Brandon Sanderson. But yeah, it just did not work for me at all. I tend to get them from the library, but not take. I don't actually think you miss out on much by not reading them at all. I love R.F. Kuang interviews, just not her books. Yes, she wrote like essays. I'd be there, but books, I'm curious. Part of the reason I'm like, no, I'm going to keep reading her standalones is I wonder if she'll like get better over her career with the like fiction parts of it. So that will be interesting to see. Um, so interesting to see what the comments are saying about Yellowface. I think you will like it based off your critique of Babel, but other people think opposite. Yes, and usually people are pretty good about like calling my taste because I give critical reviews, so people can kind of pinpoint where I am. But it's been so all over the place with Yellowface that I am also like, I don't know if I will like this. But since I was kind of already committed to reading it, like it's fine. I'm gonna read it either way. But I have like zero expectations of whether or not I will enjoy this because I don't know. Everybody's kind of all over the place with it as well. Um, okay. Let's see. I think that brings us. I do see the question about Twilight, but we'll get back to Twilight, and we'll move on to anticipated release for the rest of the year. So this is a book that has not been released yet that you are looking forward to, and so for me, it is Family Lore by Elizabeth Acevedo. I always say this when I talk about her YA is that like I enjoy them and I get a lot out of them, but I also am I think about how much more or like how differently it would have hit if I had read these books as teens, right? Which is kind of great for YA. I love to read a YA where you can tell like it is for the intended audience. It was written for young people. It had young people in mind. And Elizabeth Acevedo's YA is like that to me. Like you can tell that it is absolutely for that intended audience. And so it always fills me with like a little bit of like, ugh, I wish like I had seen this when I was a teen as well. So I'm super, super excited to read Family Lore, which is an adult book, and to see like how, like if there, the difference there, to experience another story from Acevedo and all of that. So this comes out, I should have written this down, I think in July, or August. It's pretty soon here. It's not like end of the year. I do have a copy, an audiobook copy from Libra FM, their advanced listener copies that they hand out, ALC, and so I am going to pick this up pretty soon. I'm actually going to the Dominican Republic to visit family next week, so this is one of the things that I have kind of on my vacation TBR. So what are you guys looking forward to for the rest of the year? Let me know because I also am not like great about keeping up with like releases. So if you guys have things that you are looking forward to, I'm looking forward to the next two October Day novels. I'm ready for Shannon to fuck me up again. I actually started, I'm listening to the first one, Rosemary and Rue. So what happened was I'm listening to it a lot during when I was preparing for BookNet Fest. I made all of these. Don't judge them because they're a little smushed right now because they got like transported. Uh, I just threw them in a bag, but I made like paper flowers and I was like painting and making these paper flowers that were like decoration for, like I had them in vases and they were whatever for prom as well. So as I was doing this craft before BookNet Fest, that's actually what I was listening to was the first book. And then at one point, like I was listening before I fell asleep and I just fell asleep and the audiobook kept playing. So I have to go back and figure out where I actually left off and actually finish off the book. But I was enjoying the first book so far. And I'm looking forward to picking that up as like another like, uh, urban fantasy, paranormal, like series that I can sprinkle in to my million rereads of Kate Daniels. The new Murder Bot is also on my list. Yes, Electo the Ninth comes out this year. That's my answer. If it comes out, yes. I don't think it is going to come out this year. I think it's 2024, pretty for sure. But if not, System Collapse, the new Murder Bot. Yes, I'm also looking forward to the new Murder Bot for sure. Every Sun Rising and Murderbot. Thread of Power by V.E. Schwab. Yeah. Yeah. I'm not a fan. V.E. Schwab will be on this live a little later on, though. So, more Murderbot and new T. Kingfisher. I have a copy of the new T. Kingfisher. I'm so freaking excited. We'll talk about her later as well. New Murderbot. I love seeing all this Murderbot love in the chat. Amazing. Yes, Shannon is going to mess us up with these two books. Clapping You Land is a very great book. Let's see. Two Twisted Crowns, August 1st for Family Lore. Thank you for looking that up. I thought it was July, August. So, I was right there. Yes, Silver Nitrate is probably my like second. Is it out yet? Is it out yet or not? But it was on my like most anticipated of 2023. I am very excited. I read Sylvia Moreno Garcia is another author that I will read everything. And even my things of hers that are like least favorite are still in that like 3-star range. So I'm always super excited when she releases a new book. Being Ace, looking forward to that. October Days gets so much better as the series goes along. I have heard this. So I was ready to to experience like a solid 3-star book. And that's kind of where I was halfway through listening, or maybe a little bit more than halfway. Like, I'm enjoying meeting the characters and like navigating the world. So I can definitely see that this is like a strong introduction and the kind of series that would get better as it goes on. T. Kingfisher. I also barely keep up with new releases. Darkwater Daughter. I haven't read any H.M. Long yet, but I am interested in doing so. The Spirit Bares Its Teeth. Not usually a horror person, but I'm super intrigued. Interesting. I am also not super a horror person. So, I'll leave that one to you. Let me know how it goes. Burger King foot lettuce. Water Outlaws. Let's see. Electa was supposed to be this year, but just looked and it seems to have gotten bumped to 2024. Yeah, I know that because we have a lot of Lock Tomb fans in my Discord, and I'm pretty sure I heard them being sad about the push to 2024. I do have Thorn Hedge. I'm very excited. It's an ebook copy, so I don't like have it, but it is waiting to be read. Mm-mm-mm. Most of Sylvia Moreno Garcia's work is too horror for me. Interesting, because I just talked about like how I'm not like a horror fan, but I can do her horror really easily. I find her horror like I say I don't do horror, but like gothic horror is right on the cusp of things that I can do. Like if it's like a haunted house, anything along those lines, I'm okay with. I can do more of that, and that's how I find her horror. Like I've been okay with it. We'll see with Silver Nitrate. It might be the one that I'm like, okay, that too much. 2 more weeks until that one comes out. So I'm looking forward. Mm-mm. Hello, welcome. I am doing okay. All right, those are anticipated releases, so we can move on to biggest surprise. Okay, biggest surprise. So let's talk about why I picked Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmus. So I had done a video, like it was one of those collaboration videos that we did at the beginning of the year, reading Goodreads Choice Awards winners for 10 years. And before I did that, like the TBR and the project was like secret, right? We didn't tell anybody, but I did do like a TikTok where I showed myself like shopping in Barnes and Noble, and I picked up this book and I said like, I know I need to read this soon or whatnot. And the amount of comments that I got that were like, can't wait until you read it, give us your thoughts, give us your thoughts. And usually when people tell me that is because they didn't like it and they're expecting that I won't like it. When people are like, bestie, read it, like tell us your thoughts. So I was like, oh my gosh, oh no, I'm gonna hate this. And so if you watch that video too, it was like flop after flop. I was reading terrible book after terrible book. So like even like a few in the middle, that I was rereading that like I enjoyed, it would be another like group of flops. So I was really going into this expecting that I would not enjoy it. I was like prepared, and I was pleasantly surprised by how much this worked for me. This is a book, however, that like if you tell me you don't like it, I'm like, yeah, I get it, because it is weird. I think that they're like the the biggest thing with that book is like the gap between like the really dark subject matters that it is tackling at points, but also sort of the tone of it. There's something that is like matter of fact, almost dry, like goofy, almost at points humor. sort of tied with that. So it can be a little bit of whiplash going from like these terrible things that are happening to our main character to like these like really sort of like goofy life things that are also happening to her, or like the goofy sort of sense of humor that it can sometimes have. But it worked so well for me. You guys know that I love weird books, and this was so weird. I think it is like this cover, it's not doing it any favors for what it actually is. I don't think it was like well marketed for what it actually is, but the if you like weird books, if you like character driven books, I think that this is a good one. And I think with any character driven book, it kind of hinges on if you feel for the main character. And I did. I like sort of almost immediately felt for the main character. So this worked for me. I gave it, I think, 4 out of 5 stars. 4.5. I think I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. And I was ready to hate it. I was ready to be like, yeah, guys, thanks for warning me. It's not one, this is not one that I would recommend easily to a lot of people, but it really, really worked for me. So that was a surprise. Let me know. I just saw this, sorry. I am so interested to see the adaptation of Lessons in Chemistry. The thing about this book too is that it was, I don't want to say atmospheric, but there was like a sense of like style about it, or like I don't know. I feel like I can just picture all of it really well. The aesthetic of this book like has like a very clear aesthetic to me. It does not match again that cover, but so I'm really interested in seeing how that translates into an adaptation. I think it will do well. I think because an actor is going to give the character even more life and like make you feel even closer to sort of the interpretation of the character. This is something that could work really well in an adaptation. So I'm super excited to see that. Um, Surprised how much I liked Blood Water Paint, a poetical take on what happened to the artist Artemisia. Interesting. I hadn't heard about that one. Uh, uh, uh. I read War and Peace with a group and was surprised to find out how much I ended up enjoying most of it. It is a very long book, so enjoying most of it is amazing. Little Eve and Needless Street. And checked it out on checked out the audiobook on a whim and absolutely loved it. I love when that happens. Either I'm going through like the bookstore and I just randomly like pick a cover by or something that looks interesting. More likely is usually me scrolling on what's available now through my library, and I just like look at something or pick something that looks interesting, and then it ends up being a banger. So good. I agree with Lessons in Chemistry. It felt very different from anything I'd seen about it. Agreed. Untethered Sky by Fonda Lee worked so much more for me than Jade City, which I definitely wasn't expecting. Interesting because I didn't super love Jade City. I looked at my 2022 mid-year tag, and Jade City was my biggest disappointment for last year. So I Fonda Lee is another one that I'm like, yeah, I will give that author another try, because I think that you can tell, like, I don't know, the quality of her like prose was there. It was just some of the like other elements that didn't work for me. So, The Secret Service of Tea and Treason, because book one was fine, but I didn't like book two. So I was surprised by how much I really loved this one. Tea and Secret Service of Tea and Treason. I'm trying to picture that one, but I don't. I'm confusing it, Rachel. I think I'm confusing it with the botanist one that we both that I you read and I'm reading now. So I'm getting, because that one's like the botanist something guide to something in parties too, right? Am I confusing the heck out of myself right now? The Cruel Prince. I got nervous about reading popular books recommended by a certain kind of TikToker, but it was 4 stars for me. I DNF the Cruel Prince after 10 pages. So that's a no for me. But I feel like I see high reviews from people whose like tastes I align with usually. So it's really interesting that this one like super doesn't work for me, but I know so many people that it does work for. Uh, uh, uh. Would you be able to talk a bit about that in regards to your fantasy reads this year? Thoughts and articulations on critical thinking and how nothing is created in a vacuum. I'm going to save this one for a little bit later, once we kind of go through some more of my picks. Yeah, my tags. The biggest surprise was actually the third book in the Wheel of Time series. The first two took me 6+ weeks, but that one only took me 2 days. Okay. I finally watched season one of Wheel of Time and I liked it. I really enjoyed it. I think it improved upon Eye of the World. But watching it convinced me that maybe I want to reread Eye of the World and try to continue with the series. I was watching it with Nicole, who also read the book and did not enjoy it. And I kept going, do I want to reread this? And she's like, do I want to reread this? But then we've been like, no, no, no. But I don't know. I'm still left with that lingering feeling of maybe I just need to give it like another try and get further into the series. The bad thing though is that like if you hear fans of it, it will be like, yeah, it gets better at this book and then worse at this book and then better at this book. So am I signing up for that? I don't know. We'll see. I'm going to give it some more time to see if I'm still left with this feeling of wanting to reread it. But they're so freaking long. Biggest surprise was the faceless old woman who secretly lives in your home. I love books with really long titles. It's a Welcome to Night Vale novel. Oh, okay. And she wasn't my favorite in the podcast, so I was pleasantly surprised by the book. Interesting. Marple was the biggest surprise. I don't usually like it when other authors take over someone else's character, but this really worked. Definitely, I think I gave Jade City 3 stars, and I was so sad about it. I also gave it 3 stars, so we're on the same wavelength. Biggest surprise for me was House Moving Castle. It was my first book by Diana Wynne Jones, and honestly, it was so much more delightful than I thought it would be. I love House Moving Castle. Oh God, I'm backwards here. So much. It's one of my comfort rereads. So I really loved that somebody else loved it as well. Uh, uh, uh. Do you want to read entire chapters where clothes are described meticulously? If you do, go back to Wheel of Time. And that is like part of my issue with like the first book is that like there it was sort of repetitiveness and sort of the like flora and the fauna, the description of all of that doesn't bother me. Like I love Lord of the Rings, I love epic fantasy, like I can do it, but at the expense of other things, that's when it starts to bother me. And in the first and Eye of the World, it was at the expense of the characters. They were so bland so much of the time, and we were just ending like they were separated and there were all of these like solo just rambling trips that I was like, Jesus, make it end. So do I want to reread it? Gosh. Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross was so surprising because I'm usually wary of enemies rivals to lovers and historical fiction mixed with magic, but it was so good and fucked me up. Highly recommend. I'm actually in the middle of reading this, and I'm also same thing, not a fan of enemies or rivals to lovers at all, but I'm in the middle of reading this and really really enjoying it. It is like well written and super atmospheric, and I actually like enjoy the characters and understand like the tension between them and like why they are at odds in a way that's what bothers me in a lot of like enemies or rivals to lovers is that like it's usually like shut up both of you or like just talk it out, listen to each other, communicate, and it would be resolved, and that isn't necessarily the case here. So I'm enjoying it a lot. I hope to finish it soon, and it has made me curious about more of Rebecca Ross's work. So started Wheel of Time after seeing the series. The first book definitely felt like work to get through, but it picked up so hard after that. Stop it. You're gonna convince me. I read the first books of Wheel of Time and gave up to read Malazan instead. I will never read those books. I am absolutely terrified of the fans of those books. Don't tell them I said that, please. Don't forget that Brandon Sanderson takes over Wheel of Time later on. I know. Amazing. That I was like, I don't know if I'll ever read him. Maybe I'll read Wheel of Time. Jordan loves describing buttons. Love it. Love it. It's why the TV show works so well. He gave them perfect arc direction notes. The costuming in the first season was so lovely. Oh my gosh. Rosamund Pike and all of her wonderful coats and gowns, just loved it. Uh, yes, I have my eye on the Howl's edition or the Folio Society edition of Howl's Moving Castle. I've got a few Folio Society books, and so I look at them often. And I'm like, they're so expensive. But Howl's is one. I want to finish getting all of the rest of the Jane Austen ones because I have a few, and that one I look at it a lot. Let's see. Yeah, 80s and 90s fantasy is just baggy. We read them because we had no internet. Amazing. uh, I wasn't expecting to cry at the end of Divine Rivals. Thank you for giving me the heads up. I did hear that somebody was like, "Oh, is it a series?" because of the way it ended. So, I'm prepared. Um, Surprised with Deathless by Catherine and Valenti. It was Stranger, but loved her prose. I'm having like an unhaul pile that is like right in front of me, and Deathless is on top because it is so beautifully written and very, very effective, but to the point that it was so effective that it was like hurting me to read. I was like, I can't do this. So I know I talked recently or earlier about like loving all of Catherine and Valenti's work, and I do, and this is still like really good and very well written, but I just could not like emotionally do that one. So I've tried like multiple times and I finally was just like, okay, I tried it. It's a DNF and like give it a better home. So uh too many and too long. Deathless is incredible. Uh, 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 if I get picked for House Salt, which by the way, usually we do House Salt live shows on Sunday night, like when I'm doing this. But we had someone had a family emergency, so we had to move some things around. So tomorrow, July 3rd, Monday night at 8 p.m. Eastern time over on Sam's channel, we're going to be doing the live show for Vampire Academy. Have I read it yet? No. I keep starting and I keep getting one paragraph in and quitting because it is painful to me. It's like I was gonna say nails on a chalkboard, but that is sound. So I was gonna say like nails on my eyeballs. It's a terrible visual there, but I am in pain reading this. So I've left myself exactly one day basically to finish reading this before the live show tomorrow. But yes, tomorrow is the live show also where we will pick the next 3 books for us to read. If I get picked, I will make everyone read Divine Rivals. Yes. Yes, the shoulder piece thing. I don't even know what but I want to wear it. I want to wear it everywhere. I want to wear it to Target. I want to wear it to the doctor's office. Beautiful. All right. I think we've mostly caught up here. So we can go on. I think I had there are some of these that I picked like 2 in one category. So I have another biggest surprise. But it's kind of in a different direction and it's Corinne. So this is not a positive surprise. But it did surprise me. I will say I was kind of expecting to enjoy or appreciate the book more than I was because one of the earliest reviews that I saw, like when I was doing research about this, and Mara had asked me to be on this live show to talk about like who this, and in case you guys are not cut up, I know I did a whole video, but this is a book that was written under a pseudonym, and the bio in the back basically said Rebecca Morrow is a pseudonym for a New York Times bestselling author, and the book is about sort of leaving the church and some like religious trauma associated with that, et cetera, et cetera. And it's kind of like billed as a romance. So it's between this woman who has left the church. She was like kicked out of the church and never went back. And like the man who is still involved and it's like an unnamed denomination. So I was expecting to appreciate it more than I did because when I was doing my research, like the like main person who was talking about it at the beginning really enjoyed this in a way that, and like I don't know, from the perspective of this being like literary fiction or whatever, the way that they talked about it, I was like, cool. It's going to be I did not think that it was written by Stephanie Meyer, but if it was written by Stephanie Meyer, I expected to hate it. If it wasn't written by Stephanie Meyer, I was kind of like, maybe I will like it because there are good reviews out there. This was so bad. I This is so bad. I really did not enjoy reading it. It was like a physically uncomfortable experience reading this because of the way that that the author wrote the characters and the way that she wrote the relationship and the way that she wrote sex, and like everything about it was just really like uncomfortable. And I can't even say if it was like well done or not because I don't know what the point of this book was. But the reason that I really wanted to include it as a surprise here is that I am like now 99.9% sure that this was written by Rainbow Rowell. I did my investigation. Amy, who is in the chat, came coming in clutch with the Wayback Machine, pulling up blog posts, like everything that came together between the live show and our Discord, my Discord, and like the video that I did. I'm like 99.9% sure that this was Rainbow Rowell. So I posted my video. I say it's Rainbow Rowell, and I'm not saying it was me. I'm just saying very soon after that, all of the digital copies of this book got pulled. You can no longer buy this as an ebook, and you can no longer buy it as an audiobook. It was still, last time I checked, available in some libraries, but some people who like went to their library and didn't have it available. And if you go on like Amazon, you can still buy physical copies of the book, but every time I check, it's like, hurry up, there's only like 4 copies left. Hurry up, there's only 3 copies left. So I don't know why you would like pull all of the digital copies of a book unless you got outed as the author. So before I was like 99% sure that it was Rainbow Rowell, but now I'm like 99.9% sure that Rainbow Rowell wrote this. Really, really bad book. But the surprising thing was like the whole saga that I went through with this freaking book. Honestly, I think about it all the time still. I think about it all the time. And I think about, will we ever know? Will that point one, will I ever be 100% sure that Rainbow Rowell wrote this? I don't know. I'm, that I am still like overwhelmed. Amazing. Please let me know what we already talked about biggest surprise. I can just catch up on comments here. Let's see. Why would you bring this book up? There's Amy. My partner in trauma. Come on. Did you have this on like your bingo card for this year that we would be like investigating a pseudonym? Not a positive surprise. No. I would listen to your theories on Corinne for days. Honestly, I was with my best friend when I was going through this, and I felt like I was like talking her ear off, and I was like, and then we pulled this off. And honestly, if you got me started now, we could probably talk through the whole thing again. Loved the live and your video. Thank you very much. Suffering the book. Thank you guys for watching and rewatching. Yes, the drama, I live for it. I did not, super surprising that this would all go down. Corinne is still available digitally through my library. So I checked recently on Amazon and they still weren't available there. And I don't think my library had a digital copy anymore. So it's weird. All I'm saying is that it's weird. This book should be removed from existence. Amy. I feel like we're going to know one of Amy's answers when we get to the worst book. On the one hand, I don't want to laugh about someone's personal book about religious trauma. On the other, it's also by the same author who wrote Eleanor in Park. Yes. And so like the thing is, the reason that I'm like, I don't even know what this book was about is that is it about her, like, I don't know, is it about her religious trauma? There were so many things that it was still like just sort of like emphasizing, or just sort of, I don't know, the religious trauma was still there, and she was like feeding it to us now as well, in a way that it wasn't challenged, it wasn't investigated, and I was so uncomfortable. I again, I don't know what the end goal of this book was, but it did make me incredibly uncomfortable, and it passed on some like weird things, like some fat phobia, some weird things about people's bodies. It passed on like just the ending message, where like she just the woman is like in a terrible situation, that it was actually like really dark, and I don't think it was supposed to be, because everybody calls this a romance. I just See, I could go on forever about this. Thank you so much. A positive surprise. The fact that on that live, y'all were looking at the playlist. Amazing. Okay, people's libraries do have the ebook and audiobook. So, I don't know. I don't know what's going on there. But I think we'll see. I will keep checking as once a quarter, to see if they're being sold, if they got like pulled for some reason, and then the audio, like the ebook and audiobook copies, are available to buy. But apparently, you can see some libraries still have them as well. Yes. Libraries tend to buy a license for a limited number of borrows. So maybe some libraries have borrows left, but the ones that don't can't rebuy. Interesting. So no, we're going down this rabbit hole again. Okay, enough of Corinne. Moving on to biggest disappointment. So this is not like worst of the year for me. We'll get to worst a little bit later on, but these are ones that are like disappointed me. I had high hopes for it, and I just like they did not deliver. So for me, that is Legends and Lattes. I actually bought this on vacation. No, I thought I had my copy somewhere over here, but I don't actually see it. I bought a copy when I was in Dublin, and I we were at the bookstore, and I wanted to buy a like a souvenir book, and I was like, oh, Sam was like, we should read Legends and Lattes for House Salt, and I was like, absolutely, and I'll buy it here. I'll buy the UK copy because I'm sure I'm gonna like it. I know I'm gonna like this book. I was like, it'll be great. So my hopes were really high, and this was such a big disappointment for me. It did not deliver on any of the like promised like coziness. I didn't have a good time with it. I think that I think it was just so flimsy in a way that people were like, well, it's cozy. No, no, no. Cozy it can still have like direction. It can still have characters that feel like fully fleshed out. It can still, I don't know. This just lacked so many things for me in terms of like the direction of the plot and like the characterization. I think someone on the House Salt Live called it not a found family trope, but like found coworkers, because that is sort of like the like level that you get of like these characters interacting and being next to each other. So it didn't even feel close. It was like, oh, coworkers, in a way that, just gave nothing. It was just a bunch of giving nothing. And then there were some elements that just kept pulling me out of the story too. Like, some things would be named like coffee, and croissants or something like that. But then like they would invent cinnamon rolls and like not have a name for cinnamon rolls. And then there's this like weird like colonizer vibe too, of like this woman is like, I discovered coffee in this foreign country, and now I'm going to bring it to you in a way that I was like, that's weird. And it wasn't necessarily that the book didn't have stakes either. It was that the book kept bringing up stakes and being like, look at all these stakes. Look at her past. Look at this stuff that's happening in the city. And then just going, and then like wandering off away from the stakes. I don't, I didn't like it. I don't get it. It's a huge disappointment for me personally. Let's hear it. Tell me what your disappointments of the year were. Let me know if you enjoyed Legends and Lattes, because everybody mostly does. Again, that's part of why I was like, oh, I know that I'll like it, but I definitely did not. Is it a Hugo nominee? Are the Hugos announced? Stop. Are the Hugos announced and this is a nominee? Because I would be really sad. A Day of Fallen Night, disappointment. We're going to talk about Miss Samantha Shannon later on. I loved Legends and Lattes. It really hit the spot during a dark time. I totally get it. It didn't spark any joy in me. I just kept being distracted by all of the things that it was not. And it was not a lot to me personally. The Luminaries by Susan Dennard. Susan Dennard is an author that I really like. I've met a couple of times and I've enjoyed her in person. And so like I always think like I want to read her work. But I don't know. Something about her work doesn't fully attract me. And The Luminaries was one that I was like, I don't think that this is going to be for me. And since then, I've heard really, really mixed things about it. So sad to hear that it was a disappointment for you. The Adventures of Amina Al-Sarafi was my biggest disappointment, unfortunately, the world's biggest David Bod fan. The reason that I'm kind of like whatever about Amina Al-Sarafi is that I've tried to read the first book in the David Bod series like 3 times, and I never make it past 50 pages. It doesn't grip me. I can't pinpoint exactly anything else other than like I keep trying and I keep like just putting it down and wandering it away and wandering away. So I don't know. I don't know. What like if you don't like David Bod, will you like Amina or vice versa? Or is it like some, one of those authors that like some fans have their like favorite and others the other kind of situation? Or is it just like me and Shannon don't get along? Disappointment was The Girl from Everywhere duology by Heidi Helig. Flower Heart, supposed to be a cozy cottage core book, but it was just so Wattpad that it hurt my eyeballs. Okay, good to know. Legends and Lattes was interesting because I kept thinking about the colonist element of the whole coffee thing and couldn't get past it going unacknowledged. Agreed. Actually, when I was reading that was not one of my complaints. I think I saw one of my complaints was like related to that, and I hadn't been able to like put words into it, and I saw a review where somebody was like, hello, the coffee colonist vibes, and I was like, oh my god, that's exactly what it is. So you know what, read Legends and Lattes. Again, 90% of people love it, get a lot out of it. I did not personally. I went into expecting to like Legends and Lattes, and it wasn't bad. Sure. I gave it 2 stars. I also didn't think it was like terrible. It wasn't like super bad. I just didn't think it was great. Daughter of the Moon Goddess. I was really hoping for more analysis of parent-child relationships and less love triangles. Uh, Hugo's have been okay. On the Nebula shortlist, I don't think Hugo finalists have been published. Okay. I thought I missed it. Let's see. The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. Um, that one was like, it had a good amount of hype for a while on BookTube, like a few years back. And I never got around to it. Sleeping Giants. Yes, I DNF'd this. Yeah, I was extremely annoyed the entire time. That is all I remember about that experience, is that I tried to read it and I was so annoyed that I DNF'd it. I don't remember any other details. I cannot tell you, but just know +1 on DNFing. Red Scholar's Wake. Let's see who else. It makes sense to me that Legends and Lattes was a NaNoWriMo novel. I think it really could have benefited from a lot more workshopping and revising. Agreed. Uh, yes, it felt empty. That is such a great way to put it to me. It felt incredibly empty. Even the characters, the character interactions, the world pieces, all of it just felt super, super flimsy. And so, like, I wanted to get lost in this, into the story. I wanted to be like escape into it, but it kept just being it kept pulling my attention into all of these flimsy pieces of the work. So Daisy Jones and the Six, and the format just did not work for me like at all. The format was okay for me, but I will admit that I listened to the audiobook and read the book at the same time. And we did a Snark Squad pod episode of this podcast episode, and I'm pretty sure that Kat Booktube Cat was our guest for that episode. And so I think like Nicole listened to it and Kat read it, or vice versa, and I listened to and read it. And so they both had complaints about the format. And I was like, I had a great time with the format, at least. I hated the ending of that book, and it completely just sort of changed my experience of that book. I would give it like 3 stars. And I sometimes recommend it to people as like an easy read, but the ending of it like really, really ruined it for me. And I agree that, like, I don't know, it's almost like you need like the full cast of the audiobook, but you need the visual clues of who actually is talking and where we are from the actual book. So it's a very weird thing. I was disappointed by Legends and Lattes. Thank you. God Killer was my biggest disappointment. I felt like it tried to do a lot in a small number of pages, and I felt very disconnected. I will read the next one only to see if it gets better. The Virgin Suicides, a book that has never been on my TBR. The writing was beautiful, but I did not want to read about the middle-aged man reminiscing on watching a traumatized 14-year-old having sex on her roof. Yikes. Priory of the Orange Shoe was my biggest disappointment. Everyone loved it, but I DNF'd it after 200 pages because nothing was happening. Priory is on my list somewhere here as well. I actually don't remember where I put it, but I know it's on here. I casually listened to Legends and Latte so I could gloss over a lot of the craft issues that are super distracting when reading with my eyeballs. Fair enough. I read Legends and Lattes when it first came out and thought it was fine, but forgettable. I was so confused when it blew up. Biggest disappointment, The Unbroken. It wasn't a bad book, but I just had a hard time following the writing. I think Clark's brain just doesn't like my brain. Interesting. Work like my brain, yes. God Killer, also another one. I liked Amina so much more than David Bod. Oh, see, so it is a thing. Like, if you're a David Bod person, maybe you won't like Amina and vice versa. So maybe I will try Amina. uh, I'm the Girl by Courtney Summers. Well written, but super dark, heavy, and completely unsatisfying. City of Brass. I keep trying to read City of Brass, but because it's my friend's favorite, but I keep just bouncing off. I'm glad I'm not the only one because I feel like it's so well regarded, and like that's why I've kept it. And I'm like, okay, no, this is the time that I'm gonna really read it, and I never make it past 50 pages. Amina has a different tone. Plus, it feels like a standalone, so it's less investment. I think you might like it. Thank you. Thank you. The Days of the Deer. DNF, but maybe if I read it in Spanish, I'll like it. I deeply dislike the test, and it turned me off to reading more of his stuff. I did not try the test because Sleeping Giants was such a put off. I was so put off by Sleeping Giants. I don't know why I don't want to read, but I don't. So is it Sylvan Nouvelle? I think something along those lines. The Light Between Us. Expected a You Got Mail situation between a French Jewish girl and US Japanese boy, and all I got was 600 pages of suffering and no happy ending. Oof. Oof, not 600 pages for no happy ending. I am so sorry. I almost DNF Daisy Joan. Did anybody watch the adaptation? I haven't, because I'm still upset at the book and the ending. So, biggest disappointment was also Amina. I couldn't get past the soapboxing, which is something that normally doesn't bother me, but it seems so ham-fisted and out of place. Interesting. Disappointed by The Witch King, which a lot of us said that is still on our TBR, probably because of very high expectations. Sure, I think it needed to be 2 books and about 4 characters and 3 magic systems could be removed and some key relationships develop more. Interesting. The Cruel Prince, which is somebody's biggest, or like I think somebody's like biggest hit or whatnot. It was so incredibly hyped with super high ratings, and it was somehow a first book filled entirely of filler. Incredibly disappointing to me. Uh, Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies. How can reading a firsthand account about fairies be so boring? If I wanted to read boring stuff, I'd read a real encyclopedia. Tomorrow. I love video games, but this was just blah for me. I totally feel that. I gave it 4 stars. I almost DNF'd it when I started it though. Like I was having a very hard time like getting into it, especially maybe not getting into it. The first chapters I was like in it, but as it starts just being like downer after downer, I had a really hard time, but I stuck it out and I appreciate this book a lot. There are a lot of things that I wish it had done differently, but there's still something about like the writing and the quality and how memorable some of the scenes are or whatnot that I super appreciate it. Super appreciate. But when people tell me that they didn't like it, I'm like, yeah, I understand. This is one and I understand. Mm-mm. If we're allowed to put a book in multiple categories, Fourth Wing would also easily qualify for my biggest disappointment, but not surprised. I didn't have a ton of expectations with Fourth Wing because I read it so quickly after it was released. And I had heard like Bethany talk, give it a 5 star. So I was like, oh, okay, cool. Bethany gave it a 5 star. So I was like, this will be good. And Satray on uh, TikTok, who is also one of my mutual, like gave it 5 stars and was raving about it. So I was like, okay, cool. But I read it so quickly after that that it didn't have time to like really build hype for me. So I would not say that it was like a super disappointment, but Fourth Wing is on my list for later. My biggest disappointment was a Psalm for the Wild bit. Built. It has insects. You can't be cozy if your book has insects. Okay. Okay. Yes. Another DNF for Emily Wild. Six of Crows. I gave Six of Crows a chance this week and fell asleep. Yes. Six of Crows is like my favorite Lee Bardugo book, and I still gave it like 3 stars. But the first time that I read it, I DNF'd it. I was like, no, I can't do this. And then the second time I went back and like stuck it out. And so I ended up appreciating some of the characters or whatnot. But man, Lee Bardugo has issues with pace, really badly paced books generally. So, yes, Lee Bardugo is overrated. She's like Sanderson, where reading her stuff feels like homework. Another disappointment for me this year was Dorian Gray. I liked it overall, but a couple of chapters in the middle, I basically just skipped a chapter just of item descriptions. No thanks. Sure, that feels fair. Um, mm, mm, Appreciate the warning of bugs and Psalm for the Wild built. I do see, yes, the Brandon Sanderson thing is an LDS tithing thing. Yes. Um, I think we were talking about this recently because Rebecca Yaros was also Mormon at some point, and she has now come out and said that she's not actively a Mormon. So it was like a conversation about like supporting authors who are like tithing to the LDS church, and like if you don't want your money to go there, making that decision for yourself. And I think I probably should, like I don't have sources available, but I think someone found like an article or something where Brandon Sanderson basically did say that he's still active in tithing. So what you do with that information, that's up to you. For me personally, I don't want my money going there, so I'm not going to give Brandon Sanderson my money. All right, we caught up, so we can move on to here she is, another biggest disappointment, and that is The Priory of the Orange Tree. I also read this for one of those collab videos. I did like hype videos or whatnot, so this is my like pick for a hyped book, and I found this incredibly disappointing. You know, I kind of waffled in putting this in disappointment because I read Samantha Shannon's first book, Something Bones. Help me out here. That's how much I've yeeted that experience out of my brain, and I really did not like that book. It was pretty bad. So part of me was like, maybe Samantha Shannon is the problem. Part of me did have hope that this would be better because it was like years later. She has grown as an author, and because people really love. Sorry, my dog is like freaking out. People really love this book. So I was like, okay, maybe this will be better. Was it better? I don't know. It was like marginally better than the other book. But I didn't enjoy it. I think that there were like a lot of issues with like the building of the world. I think was so empty. I think the characters felt very similar, and in the beginning when you're like cycling through them in terms of POV shifts, it becomes an issue just kind of keeping track of everything. I did not like the main relationship at the heart of it at all. There were some like problematic things to me around that relationship. And just so many elements of it were empty. And then it had the audacity to be as long as it was. And I did not have fun with this one at all, unfortunately. I know you guys already shared your disappointments with me. Uh, why read Priory when you could read the Jasmine Throne? Fair enough. The Bone season, thank you. Bone something, I knew. Bone season was so bad. It was so bad. And for what? I don't understand. I don't understand. I heard when we did the live show for House Salt on Bone season, like people were saying that she's going to rewrite and re-release book. So maybe even she knows that that book is so bad. Priory was a disappointment for me too. It's over 1,000 pages, and for what? For what? And then it was one of those things where it like early in the book, it just took everybody forever to get anywhere because, like, it's a big country and they're traveling around or whatnot. And then at the end, when it's like time to like hurry up and do fights and stuff, everyone was just like zip, zip, zipping around. And I was like, are you serious right now? The pacing was bad. Just, yes, everything I said about it being a disappointment. Brandon Sanderson reversed a lot of his views gained from his church, but I think he's still active in it. That is correct. He has, like, I don't know. There's a sense that he is a more progressive Mormon, but he is still active in the church and financially contributing to the church. So again, do with that information what you will. Everybody can make their own decisions around their money. Just for me personally, that's why I said I don't want to give him money. Reading Dorian Gray felt like Oscar Wilde was just messing with me, which actually made me like it more. Fair enough. Thing with Prairie, yeah, it's long, but it is artificially made bigger. So many books of similar word count are smaller. They definitely wanted a chunky book for the vibes. That was like another thing in that video, was like, did the hype sort of like fool me? And my conclusion was really that, like, no, I didn't know anything about this book going into it besides it's so big and like sort of the clout of reading this big book and sapphic romance, standalone dragons. Like, those are the things. And all of those things are present. So did the hype fool me? That's all the information they gave me, and all of those things were true. So but and part of it is like, just like the vibey nature of it all. But the other part of it is like, how do you describe the freaking plot of this thing? I don't know. I'm not going to try now, that's for sure. I think I tried it in my video, but I definitely could not even start to describe what the heck happened in that book now. So that brings us to, I'm all caught up in comments, so we can move on from disappointment to worst book. So I will say that the original tag has like your book boyfriend or book crush here, and I never answer that question because I don't like that question. So I always just replace it, even though it gives you like favorite book and it gives you like surprise and disappointment, but the tag itself doesn't have like least favorite or worst book. So I just add it in every year. I take out the book boyfriend or the book crush or however it's worded, and I just add in worst book. I had a lot of pretty bad reads this year. We talked about my video from the beginning of the year about Goodreads and like how many bad books were in that book or in that video. So I like was kind of going through, and I'm like, I could pick any of these like 1-star books that I read for that video. But the one that really stood out to me was Red Rising, as you guys can see. I really hated this book. I was like rushing through the entire project. I ran out of time, and it was mostly because it took me so freaking long to finish this book. Again, in actual physical pain trying to read this. And like part of it was just like how bad this was, and like experiencing all of the misogyny that this was like putting out there, and just like the ridiculous plot that we were supposed to buy, and the aimless sort of like violence that was like happening for reasons that made absolutely no sense. So part of it was experiencing all of that. And the other part was like me remembering how much people love this book. And being like, am I reading a different thing? Like this is the Red Rising that book 2 went wild over. This is the one, right? Like I felt like I was being gaslit by my own experience of reading this book, because like it was not good. It was not good. It was not good. And I knew almost immediately when like his wife gets fridged in like the opening chapters, I was like, oh no, oh no, oh no. And truly the oh no's just kept coming. They just kept coming. And they just kept coming in a way where like the oh no's were like more important than the actual plot, or making any sort of world or like underlying like conceit that made any kind of sense. It did not make a single link of sense. There's just being stuffed in there for violence, and for a lot of violence towards women. Like terrible. Hated it. Hated it. I always love ending my little rant and then going over to the comments like, do. What are you guys saying over there? Rant done. So let's see what some of your worst books of the year so far. I do have another worst book. Maybe you guys are like, oh, that's her worst book. Didn't she read another worst book? It's coming. I picked 2 for this one. Yes, Brandon Sanderson specifically defines himself as a progressive Mormon, and he does not, and he does show a willingness to learn, but not enough to leave the church. I don't read him myself. I hated Red Rising. I DNF'd after trying to so hard to finish, but I just couldn't do it. I also hear people say the second book gets better, and like there's even some like almost retconning that happens, or like let's say adjusting that happens to like fix some of the terrible things that Pierce Brown wrote in the first book. But like the first book was so terrible that I don't believe that this series could get better. You know, I don't believe it. You know what I mean? Fourth Wing was so bad, the worst of the worst. We'll get there. We'll get there. Everyone already knows my worst. Yes, it was Corinne. I have no less than 6 Twitter mutuals who are obsessed with Red Rising, so this is making me crack up, not gonna lie. Yeah, I also have a ton of mutuals who like freaking love Red Rising. Some of my House Salt compatriots also love Red Rising. I like truly. There have been times in this live that I talk about a book and I'm like, I get why people like it, or I get why people don't like it, even if I feel opposite. This is one of those books that I simply do not understand. I simply do not get what there is here to enjoy. But you know, that's just me. All right. Just arrived just in time for Red Rising slander. I'm so glad that I could provide that. I'm always ready to slander Red Rising. A Tech Bro CEO recommended me Red Rising at the end of a job interview, and that's when I vowed never to read it. You know, Red Rising is so overrated. You already know my worst book was Fourth Wing. The section of your Goodreads winner was great. I'm glad that something good came out of it, because the pain that I was in. The Miniaturist by Jessie Burton. For historical fiction, there was a lot of parts that didn't make sense for the period. Somebody gifted me that book like years and years ago, and I was like, thank you, and I never read it. So this is a good reason for me to be like, oh, you know, I made the right choice. The Housemaid. I also read both ACOTAR and Fourth Wing, and I can't decide which one is worse. Ooh, which one is worse? Mm, 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 mm. I think maybe I think Akatar might be a little worse than Fourth Wing. That might just be me hating Akatar for longer, to be honest, and like having all of my issues with Sarah J. Maas. And also, like, Fourth Wing feels like such a child of Akatar. Like, there is no Fourth Wing without Akatar in a way. In a way, it's from that school of writing. So I feel like we can even blame Akatar for Fourth Wing. But there is something about Sarah J. Maas's writing that feels like worse and more convoluted than Rebecca Yarros. There were times when Rebecca Yarros's writing, like on a sentence level, got a little like convoluted, but mostly was just like skippable nothing, right? It was just like fine. It was nothing to write home about. And every once in a while it would hit this thing where I'm like, what did that just say? That what did that just say is like constant with Sarah J. Maas. Her character's line of thinking, the word choices that she used, her M dashes, the ellipses, it's just all garbage from start to finish. So I think I just talked my way into saying that Akatar is worse than Fourth Wing. Like, I was going to say, would I reread either of them? I'm in the middle of rereading Akatar. And I've already pitched doing chapter by chapter recaps for Fourth Wing. So, that I'll take that back. I also hated Red Rising. I'm going to read Golden Sun at some point because everyone says that's when the series gets good, but I don't have the energy to do that anytime soon. Yes, everybody was like, no, just keep reading Golden Sun. That's when it gets good. Again, I don't see me hating Red Rising this much and moving on and being like, Golden Sun was great. Like, I hated this too much. There's no going back. Hooked by Emily McIntyre. Oh, is that the sexy Peter Pan retelling? Yeah. I've heard really bad things about that one. When I see somebody defend this book, I side eye them. The sheer misogyny. The sheer misogyny is like dripping. My personal problem with Sanderson is the Kickstarter project. It feels like us booksellers who helped his sales from the very beginning were robbed from those sales. Interesting. I hadn't really heard that take, but I also haven't been following anything around the Kickstarter or anything very closely because again, I'm just like, Sanderson. So I hate how female characters are treated throughout the whole series. I don't understand why I even pushed through them to begin with. Okay, so it keeps going because people tell me that it gets better. That like, oh no, he starts treating women well in book 2. My worst book was an indie pub that I'll not name because the author is local to me. Oh, that's really nice of you. But also it's probably in your best interest just to, you know, keep that one. The Twisted Ones by T. Kingfisher. The main character was grating and the third act was a mess. I'm hoping I'll feel differently about her fantasy novels. Solomon's Crown, the very concept of Richard Lionheart, Philip Augustus RPF that just glosses over the Crusades' insanity. Worst is The End Is Always Near, historic nonfic. Oh, first half was fun. Last 100 pages dragged. Endless footnotes, sometimes over half a page. Zero new ideas added, just recounting others' research. Atlas Paradox was the worst for me. I still don't know what the fuck even happened in that book. I DNF'd the first one, so if the second one is even worse, like, yeah, I made a good choice for myself. Let's see. I also didn't like The End Is Always Near. It just wandered around history without having a real point. Never read Red Rising, didn't feel the vibes and feeling justified. Don't you just love that? When you like have a vibe about a book and then later you're like, I was right. I don't believe in it gets good in book blank. Baby, if I didn't like the first book, I'm not reading that far. I will read, like, if the first book was like a 3-star, I will read on. I've even read on in like a 2.5 star. I'm like, okay, maybe, but I like hated this. I gave it 1 star. I don't know. There's just nothing in me that has any hope that I would move on to the second book and be like, oh, what a surprise. It's good now. You know? Interview with the Vampire. I started it because of the AMC show, but I didn't like any of the characters or the writing. Inheritance Games. A ton of book talkers I follow love Red Rising. Yes. But to be fair, a ton of book tubers like this when I was early in my booktube days, this was also like huge. People love this series. So I that's not like a book talk thing. I think that it's kind of like universal. People really like this book, and I just personally really don't get it. Red Rising came off my TBR because of you. Thank you. Amy, I can tell you, not even like 1-to-1, I can tell you that you would hate this. Just knowing how much you hated Fourth Wing and like other things, like, yes, do not read this book. No, don't do it. The Chain, just from the whiplash I got. The second half was so what the fuck. It ruined the entire thing. After you're seeing your video on Red Rising, it shocked me how many people from various demographics I see saying it's one of the best things ever. You and me both. You and me both. Worst book, Mallory by Josh Mallerman. What's Fourth Wing? I see everybody talking about it. I will talk about it shortly. I don't understand that just read the half of the series first and then you'll like it. Stands looking at you, Zodiac Academy. Yes, same. I can the number of like Zodiac Academy fans that find me on TikTok to tell me to like read book 2 after I just absolutely roasted, like eviscerated book 1, and I'm like, bestie, I'm not gonna like book 2. I'm not gonna like it. But I actually think it's pretty cute. People are so hopeful that they're like, no, it gets better. I don't think Golden Sun gets better. It's just fans being hopeful. I just said hopeful. I gave every book in the series 3 stars. Yes, that's fair. From Blood and Ash was the worst, but also I went in knowing it would suck, and it was in fact the brain off time I wanted to have once I figured out when to skim the terrible world building. I could not turn my brain off because it was so bad. It was slapping me in the face. So, like, I get when people are like, well, I just didn't pay attention to the book and to enjoy it. But also, I'm like, there wasn't a good book. you know and From Blood and Ash is definitely one that you have to skip a lot. Fourth Wing, don't get me started on For the Win. This book was not for the win. I'm getting there. I'm catching up so we can move on to my other worst book. I don't have time to read books I don't enjoy. It's wild to me that people actually read books. Like, if it's not good, I'm not reading it. I hate read books all the time. And it's not really a time thing. Like, I don't know, I have more time than you have time, like, or whatever. We all do what we can with our free time. But also, like, I'm a book reviewer and I'm a content creator. So even when I don't like a book, I still get like value out of it. To me, like, whether or not I like the book at the end of the day is like only one piece of it. I enjoy the act of reading. I enjoy reviewing. I enjoy talking to people about books. So whether or not I like the book ultimately is only one small portion of that. Where for other people, whether or not they like it is like the entire thing. I only want to read books that I like, which is fine. It's just a different way of doing it. It really doesn't have to do with like, I don't have time to like waste or whatnot, because I'm not wasting my time of making content. I'm forming connections. I'm talking to you guys. Hopefully I'm making you laugh. Hopefully, like, my reviews are useful to you all. So I get a lot out of it. So yeah, that's my spiel. You can tell that I talk about this a lot when people are like, well, why do you hate read? And I'm like, okay, in the spiel. I've got my whole thing written out. A vintage crime, Obelisks at Sea. I think that's what that says, was recommended by Washington Post, was the most anti-Semitic book I've ever read. And I've read books by George Full Nazi Simeon. Hello, welcome. The only time the books get better later arguments have felt true to me is the Queen's Thief series by Megan Whalen Turner, because book 1 is so vastly different than the rest. I actually just requested all of these books from the library. I read The Queen's Thief like years and years ago, and I was like, fine. I think I gave it 3 stars. But I've heard such amazing things about the later books in the series, and also this, that they like change a lot. So I am going to reread the first book, just knowing that it's kind of like it feels like a weird little introduction, like a weird like side quest story. So knowing that, I'm gonna like quickly read through that, reread that, and try and move on because I've just heard such amazing things about the Queen's Thief series. Inheritance Game. The writing was so bad, I was convinced the author put the mind of a 12-year-old into the body of a 16-year-old and called it YA. I also don't enjoy when things feel too young for the character. Even in YA, I get it, it's supposed to be young, but there are ways that it can feel too young for the character that was selected. Yes, maybe Fourth Wing. All right, let's see. I like learning things from hate reading, and I also get a lot of enjoying from doing it through buddy reads and discussing the books. Like deconstructing what's not working is fun. Agreed. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I also like it when I should talk books. I had to DNF Happy Place because no one was talking to each other. You're supposed to be the best of friends. Happy Place is on this list later on. Uh, okay. Queen's Three Thief 3 is my most reread book. Interesting. Okay. I'm excited for them to come. There was like a few weeks wait on each of them, but that is something that I'm looking forward to. All right, moving on. Fourth Wing. You guys knew it was coming. I did like I don't know how long was that video? An hour, 2 hour video on like my reactions to how much I dislike this video. I honestly have been thinking of doing a second video about this, but not necessarily about like reviewing the book because I did it. I did the thing, but like I for those of you who don't follow me on TikTok, it has been like a whole like continuing thing where I'm talked about other elements about Fourth Wing that I didn't necessarily focus on in my review, including the trope of the ambiguously described brown man who is also violent and aggressive and very, very sexy and like slave adjacent, which is something that Sarah J. Maas does a lot. And we saw that in From Blood and Ash as well. And then again in Fourth Wing. So I have a few videos talking about that. And I've been like sort of dancing around the conversation about the representation in this, the disability rep, and how it didn't work for me with the messaging that it ultimately said and sort of reaffirmed and didn't challenge. So I've been talking about it a lot. But the other thing is that like the discourse around this book is so freaking weird to me. And it's not only that it's like defensive, it is mostly that like people are so defensive about this book in a way. My Discord calls them like sore winners because this is incredibly successful and it's still got a huge rating on like Goodreads. Like people are enjoying the crap out of it. So like the amount of defensiveness that is kind of cycling around of like trying to like I don't know even silence any bit of criticism about it is very very weird to me. Super interesting. I also think it's really interesting the way that Red Tower sort of positioned this entire idea of like YA but make it spicy is like so weird to me. The way that this feels really derivative and it feels like a bunch of other things like patched all together and like the very very suspicious sort of like marketing campaign early on, the way that this had thousands of ratings the week that it was released is like super strange. There's so many like weird elements all around it. Plus all of the conversation that is happening on Book Talk about this still, it's becoming like discourse around the book and discourse around the author, primarily because people are so defensive of the book itself. So, anyways, I'm like still like drowning in this. I mean, I'm also like still talking about it because it's so popular. I think it's really important to be critical of popular work. And this was so bad that there's just almost like an endless fountain to go back into and talk about how bad this was. Like the writing, the plotting, the entire world makes no sense. The entire, like everything about the school makes no sense. The characters are incredibly flat, so flat. All of their like interactions are like told to us. The romance is, I don't understand how people see this and think that it's a good romance because you get through most of the story and they're barely like interacting or getting to know each other or anything at all, and then it's just like bang bang sex that literally sets a room on fire and you're supposed to be like, oh, best romance ever. Like all of the elements of this were incredibly weak, weak. And so this is another one that like seeing how much people love it, I'm like, I don't get it. And also now like the discourse is sort of like taking taking a life of its own. So I've been like kind of like, do I make a second video about like in the wake of my 1 star negative review of Fourth Wing, which honestly was like one of the first ones because I read it so quickly after it was released, and it's been a lot of sort of backlash against my review. So let's see. Shit talk with Muddy is always the highlight on my feed. Thank you. This is my second worst book of the year. Vindication. Shock. Awe. I know I barely talked about how much I don't like this book, so it must be super shocking for you guys, but I really did not like this book. Yes, waiting for the Fourth Wing slander. It was coming. I had to slander Red Rising first, but here we are. I don't hate read, but I do love watching other people hate read. Fair enough. Somebody's got to do the hate reading to provide the content, right? Reviewing the fandom community. Not to like paint all of them with the same brush, but I don't know. I think that there's something there in terms of like the conversation about like processing negative reviews of things you love, of like what around this book specifically like gets people defensive, like, I don't know, rallies the troops around like this work specifically. And but also just a lot of the like, I don't know, conversation has been very weird as well. There's been a lot of like in response to criticism, things like, well, it's low fantasy, you're expecting high fantasy. And it's like, first of all, low and high fantasy mean things. It's not just low fantasy is like easy fantasy and high, but people are just saying things in a way that it's like, that's not how this works. A lot of like defense of like, well, I'm new to fantasy, so that's why I didn't like it. A lot of, I don't know, just people kind of using tons of like bits or there was one that was like I was talking about the anachronism in the review, and people were like, well, what does it matter? It's fantasy, and fantasy basically can do whatever you want. Fantasy means that it doesn't make sense. Fantasy means that you can't like critique the language. So they're using like fantasy as a genre, as this sort of like catch-all of like fantasy means that this book can be bad. It doesn't have to make sense. You can't critique the language in a way that I'm like, that's not what fantasy means. That's not what low fantasy means. Like, but I don't know, the way that it's being used by the fandom, some of the fandom, is really, really interesting to me. And again, it just makes me go, why this book? Why this book? Which is a Frankenstein's monster of like a bunch of other books. Like if you go, it's so many others. If you go through the plot of Red Queen, it is almost beat for beat the plot of Fourth Wing. Dragon Riders of Pern, people have told me up and down how many elements are taken from that one. Again, this is straight from the School of Fantasy Writing, Sarah J. Maas School of Fantasy Writing. So there are so many things that it's just like ripping off of other things. So it highlights to me like why this one even more. Am I going to read the sequel? Yes. It comes out in November and I will be reading it. Sign me up. And the inability, I'm new to book talk, and the inability to even hear criticism of the book is so wild, so defensive and dismissing, especially about the disability and race rep. Agreed. The number of times that I've been told, like, it's not even like, hey, I disagree with this point. Here's why. It's like literally trying to tear down like the argument or to dismiss the person making the argument in a way that I'm like, look, you don't have to agree that the character is flat, but you also don't have to like come for negative reviews in general. Like, it's so weird the way that can happen on TikTok. And again, it's only some people. I am usually the one that is like defending TikTok because there is like a lot of good there inside of the community as well. But right now I'm like drowning in the bad because of Fourth Wing. Oh yes, the artificial limiting of the first editions. The entire like marketing plan that Red Tower did was so interesting. They were on a rapid release. They are on a rapid release schedule. The second book is coming out in November. And you can't tell me that this first book was like properly edited and properly like sensitivity readers and all of that. So it's like rapid release schedule. It's like they sent out so many arcs, and on top of that, I'm convinced that they inflated positive reviews of this on on Goodreads and Amazon. That's my tinfoil hat theory, okay? Allegedly, according to me. And then also the artificial limiting of the first editions, where it's like, go out and get them, and then they could say, oh, it's all sold out, in a way that I'm not saying it's good or bad, but it's just very, I don't know, it rubs me the wrong way, the way that they're doing this, particularly because now that it's worked, I don't want this to be like a thing in publishing, like the fourth wing sort of like marketing package. I really don't I really hope that this does not become a thing, because now publishers are going to be like, well, it worked, because it worked really well. Whoever came up with the phrase YA but spicy needs to be smacked with a 2x4. And that was directly from the publisher. Like when they were like, Red Tower is a new imprint. It's like all of the, I don't know what it says, something about like YA, but make it spicy. And I was just like, no, please. But honestly, nailed it, because that's what Fourth Wing is. It is YA. It feels like YA, even though the characters are 20. It reads like YA, but it's got sex scenes, so nailed it. My friend said she loved the start of Fourth Wing because she loves training montages, but then she really didn't like the rest of the book. I did not like any of this. I think the beginning was like really, really painful actually to get through, because all of the bad world building and all of the terrible dialogue. But yes, if you like a training montage, I mean, they go through so many weird ones and so many like nonsense ones, but there are a lot of montages. Wait, I missed the Queen's Thief series, love. I'm such a huge fan of that series. You missed it. I did say that I requested them from my library, though, so I am going to be reading them soon. Fly or Die, I choose death. Thank you. I'm not caught up, but I wonder if Rachel, I think it's Rachel, who has a whole rant about how Fly or Die doesn't even make sense. Let's see if I scroll down if she's said it yet. But if not, and Rachel's still here, please let the people know why Fly or Die doesn't even make sense. The ickiness of YA authors wanting to make their book spicy for literal children still developing. Like, girl, if you want spicy, just write adult. And then on the flip side of that, authors who know that they want to write spicy for adults, but staying with characters who are young. Like, I want to write for adults and I want to write sex scenes, but also I want my characters to be like 18 to 20. And there is a way that you can be writing for that audience, that 18 to 20 audience, but it never feels to me like that is the purpose, especially when you are writing, like when the authors themselves are like much older and things like that. So there's a lot of like weird gray area there that requires also a lot of nuance, but it just rubs me the wrong way personally. Everything I knew about, even before I knew anything about this book, seeing it explode on TikTok with the Sarah J. Maas fans immediately told me everything I needed to know and completely put me off. It is, yes, it is, it is definitely for the Sarah J. Maas fans. People will argue because the plots are not the same, and like one's a fae and one's a dragon or whatever, but the vibes are the same. I saw someone responded to Reads with Rachel's 1-star rating, and they were like, I don't understand how you could give it 1 star because she clearly didn't like it. Yeah. I'm thinking about it. I will either like make it because this is all like keeps just like coming up for me and I'm still thinking about it, or like I'll wake up one day and just be done with this. And I'll never think about Fourth Wing again until it wins a Goodreads Choice Award at the end of the year. Let's all prepare. Sarah J. Maas did not write any books this year. It's like an 85% chance that Fourth Wing is going to win a Goodreads Choice Award. So just get ready. Um, so far, the one thing that I hope for Fourth Wing is that more normal edition hardbacks get sprayed edges. I don't think they will. I think that this is kind of like the thing. A lot of people are reselling their copies for like marked up prices right now on like, third party sites or whatnot. So it's already getting a little crazy. I saw someone call Fourth Wing feminist, but I don't see it because Violet adheres to very strict ideas of patriarchal power and macho heroism. Is it because she's sassy? Yes. Yes. Um, there's this like sense too that you're supposed to understand Violet as like strong and determined, and people equate that a lot with like, well, feminism or whatnot. But there are so many ways that like she's being controlled and manipulated, uh, and I don't know, that it feels like not even that, but it feels like the story is stringing her along in ways that doesn't give me like girl power energy, to be honest. I don't know why else you would call this feminist. I guess like there's a measure of equality between like the women at Murder College and the men at Murder College, I guess. Like, I don't know, they die in equal numbers. Is that feminist? You can tell it's getting late. I have more. I have more slides. Okay, let's go. I've been struggling to get through Fourth Wing, and I'm only 3 chapters in, so I'm with you. Yes, the beginning is really, really tough. It's really tough. I literally was not planning to vlog this, and I just started vlogging it to see if it would help me get through the book. I was like, I need motivation because I was gonna put it down within the first 50 pages. It was bad. I loved The Fourth Wing Slander because even though I loved the book when I turned off my brain, I know it's a terrible book. Yeah. Again, if you have to skip or ignore a lot of the book to enjoy it, I just feel like, I don't know, that's a big clue that probably the book itself, like the quality is not good. Um, it's not YA, it's just immature. Wh- this is a whole other conversation about what makes new adult and what makes young adult. I would be curious to hear what people think made this adult or new adult versus young adult, because I don't think that there's much that really separates it besides Violet is 20. And that feels like such a, like, I don't know, artificial thing to do, is just age up your character without thinking about any of the other elements that sort of define age category. So that's why I'm kind of like, this feels a lot like YA with like a label slapped on top that is like no adult. So let's see. If anybody negatively reviews a book I love, I just move on because there's no point in being defensive and possibly solidifying their dislike for the book. Okay, honestly, I gave this 1.5 star when I finished it, and there are other books that I've rated 1 star, like Red Rising. So, like, technically, this was a little better than some of those books, but it's like now the worst for me because the fandom has made me hate this book. Truly, truly, truly. And I don't feel bad about that. As Nicole said in a video that we did on TikTok, you're never reading in a vacuum. And so my experience of this book is not happening in a vacuum. It's happening with all of these like defensive fans, all of these people coming for me. So it's now at the point where I'm like, yes, like sinking deeper into my dislike of this book. To be clear, we're talking about a 0.5 star because this book is bad. But I even want to take my 0.5 star back at this point. Any book that blows up first on Twitter makes me automatically suspicious, fair. There's also an element of equating love with sex and vice versa in this book due to how little romance there is in this romance. Yes, like, again, 70% of the way through, she's like, huh, so what's your favorite food? And that's like the first legit conversation that they've had. And that's romance. So I think a lot of Sarah J. Maas, JLA, and now Fourth Wing readers are new to reading for fun. And so that explains a lot about the fandoms to me. I think that is a portion too. Like, yes, there it is like a muscle that you work out to read critically. And so I don't expect everybody to like read the same way I do. And there are certainly books that I read with my brain off where I also recognize, like, I don't know if this is good or not because I'm just like kind of reading it with my brain off or whatnot. But like, I don't know, those books that I read for my, like, for myself with my brain off, I don't talk about them online. I'm certainly not going to defend them because you are probably right, person who didn't read this with your brain off. You probably noticed more than I do. But it's like both things that people are like, I read this with my brain off and only for fun, but also you can't talk bad about it. And it's like, what? That's not really how it works. But yes, I agree that like Sarah J. Maas, JLA, those things are like entry points into book communities. So for a lot of people, these are like the first things that they're reading as they're coming into a book community or as they're getting back into reading. And that is like super fair that, at that point, maybe you're not as critical a reader, maybe you're not interested in being a critical reader. All of that is like fair for how people want to engage with books and book community. But don't come at me for doing it differently. I don't care what you are doing over there. If I'm posting my negative, my 1-star review over here, like why does it bother you so much that you have to be in my comment section? I will never know. It's easy fantasy because nothing about the world is important and doesn't need to be remembered. That is correct. Let's see. Can't wait for Fourth Wing 2 to be everything else for worst book you read. I didn't even think about that. That like Fourth Wing 2 is going to be the worst book that I read this year. My prediction is actually that it's going to continue to fall apart. Like I don't understand how you build on the foundation of Fourth Wing, the first book. So I have a feeling that like even people who enjoyed the first book are going to see it like falling apart in book 2. And so there's going to be a lot of people reviewing book 2. This is just purely me guessing, not liking book 2, reviewing book 2, but saying a lot of the things that like we said about book 1, and we're gonna be like, yeah, since book 1 this has been happening. So that's my guess. A lot of people are just going to sink further like deeper into their like love of this whole thing, but I have a feeling like there's going to be a chunk that falls off because again, I don't know how you build on the foundation of book 1 without it just being more and more ridiculous. So yes, fantasy can definitely make sense and have life lessons and beauty. Yes, I agreed with all of that. There was only one Walmart in 200 miles that got copies, and they got 2. Yes, it was like very limited. And then they were like, oh, we sold out. uh, 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 mm. Wait, curious about the whole thing, it not being a thing in publishing. Would it have been as annoying if it were for a genuinely good book? I'd love to hear more about that. I don't know if I would have the same feelings or like be like have noticed the pattern or like, I don't know, the marketing of it so much had it been a good book or a book that I enjoyed, right? So there's definitely an element that I can recognize of like, this is super annoying to me because it's not a good book and it's not a book that I enjoyed. But generally, I don't think anything good comes out of a sort of like rapid release schedule of like inflating sort of numbers or reviews or like this sort of scarcity mindset over like books, like first printings or whatnot. Just in general, like those things together, I don't think like that. I don't know. It's not something that I'm like, yeah. I wish all of my books were done this way because I don't see what you get out of that other than like building all of this hype up. It feels like a hype machine. And again, that's just something I'm like, I don't wish it upon. I don't hope that this was like a more widespread practice personally. So the term spicy is so immature to me. I feel like the censorship is making it easier to market that sort of thing to younger audiences. Agreed. And this is not like sort of a thing that is like totally the fault of the community. Uh, it, they were reacting to TikTok. It became a thing of like censoring your language because TikTok was censoring videos. So it became like spicy, all of the ways that people in their captions sort of like also um, how do you say censor their language or whatnot. You can't say sex, so everyone's like schmex and like things like that. And so like that's how it started, but it has become such a part of like now the language of specifically the romance community on TikTok, and it's probably bleeding into other places, that I feel like it's also like, I don't know, it is sort of like degrading some things and some definitions and some understanding of like what books are what and where they belong in categories. So it is an unfortunate side effect of the censorship that TikTok has in place. So Mm, Yes. Okay. The UK version says graduate or die. What? Interesting. Um, as someone with young teens who read so much, I have a hard time keeping up with recommendations. I really dislike how often spice is added into books that my 12-year-old will read. I cannot imagine having to navigate that. I have similar feelings towards Fourth Wings and want to do a separate discussion too. Yes, there's so much here to like pick apart. I keep getting questions of like, why are you still talking about Fourth Wing over on my TikTok? And like part of it is that like people keep asking me about Fourth Wing, but the other part is that I'm like, no, no, there's like so much here. Like I could talk about this for days. I've been talking about this for a long time, as you guys can see. So there's it's just like really, really anytime that there is something that is like massively popular that a lot of the community is reading and discussing, there's always just going to be like so much material there. And it just so happens that with this book, it is something I didn't enjoy. So there's like that material as well. But yes, I think that there's just a lot to talk about here. I haven't said it yet. There's Rachel, but it should be ride or die instead of fly because Zayden has a whole lecture about how dragons have riders and griffins have flyers. Your own tagline doesn't even make sense. Love it. uh, it is going to win a Goodreads Choice Award. I'm preparing myself. If it doesn't, happy surprise, but I'm preparing myself. It is going to win a Goodreads Choice Awards. Um, Maybe it's new adult because the sisters talk about their sex lives in the first 5 pages. Yes. And they also talk about how Violet's hair is white. And that is a totally natural conversation for two people who grew up together to have. And that's how you start the book. Yes. It's like how every YA Lee Bardugo book is fully adult fiction with the characters aged down. There's also the whole thing of like women in writing fantasy tend to also get like shelved into YA, whether or not that's really what they're writing or not. So that is also a problem that like muddies these waters. New adult just feels like an artificial division that allows publishers to publish YA with smut to young readers. It's only new adult because it has sex. Changed my mind. I was thinking about reading Fourth Wing for the disability rep, but do you not recommend? I have heard from a lot of people with EDS who really appreciated the disability rep. I have heard from a lot of people with EDS who did not appreciate the disability rep. So it's been super mixed. I will say that like generally the rep is sitting on top of a book that I think is very low quality. So like that informs a lot of what is happening. But for me personally, I don't have EDS, but I do have a chronic condition. So, like, knowing that and like my context for things, I didn't think that this rep was like, I won't say good or bad. I think that this representation was pretty shallow. I think that there was a way that a lot of the internalized ableism that Violet had and a lot of the external ableism that everybody is expressing in this world is confirmed or at least unchallenged by the work itself. The ultimate message that you get from this story is that Violet only she just has to keep trying. She has to try harder. It's like a sort of like disability warrior narrative where it's just like if you try really hard, you can succeed. And so there's so little about like pain management and what happens on days when you wake up and your body physically can't or when you don't have spoons and none of that is addressed. It's just like no, try harder and you too can succeed. And it's put up against this like idea of like, her being weak and pitiable against her being like strong and determined and just trying harder in a way that I don't think that that's a good message to have in something that is like positive disability rep. There's also like portions of this. She does get one accommodation. It's a really good moment within the story, but also like it doesn't come at her own hands. It becomes another piece of how all of the men around her are like making decisions for her and coddling her and manipulating her. And so all of that also feeds into this like negative trope when it comes to disability. So it's just a lot of pieces that I'm like that didn't work for me. I get why just seeing somebody with EDS in like genre fiction is important to people. And like the way that like diversity or representation starvation can feed into how you receive a story like that. If you're seeing yourself for the first time, that can be very impactful. But for me, when I look at all of the elements and ultimately when I look at the message that this was portraying and what it actually said, I did not enjoy it. I did not like it. So that's my whole spiel. Whether or not that means that like you should read it for the rep, I don't know. I don't think that you should expect like something super intricate. I don't think that you should expect an exploration of disability. I think that the rep goes as far as somebody with a disability at the head of a genre story, if that makes sense. I was so long. And now I'm even more behind on comments. But hopefully that was helpful. Um, for someone so close to the war her entire life, Violet did not seem mature at all about the aspects of war. Yes, I agree. She's also told, we're told so many times that she's super smart, but the whole thing is that like everybody is lying to her, everybody is bamboozling her. She has absolutely no grasp of the world, even though she was a scribe, and her whole thing was like reading histories about the world. She has no idea about the world. She has not one, but two sort of cheat books from people in her family, like giving her the answers and trying to guide her about like, hey, this is what's going on, and she still doesn't like misses it entirely. So just again, didn't make a ton of sense to me, that plot, that world, and that character. So I've yet to find an explanation between of the difference between new adult and young adult that makes sense to me. Do new and young not mean the same thing? Yes. Usually, again, the like it's like people want to cut young adult off at 18, and then new adult would be that like college age, maybe into like early 20s sort of thing. But that is only saying that the only thing that defines age categories is age of the protagonist, and to me that's not. It's like intended audience, but if your intended audience is like 18 to 20 whatever, aren't those just adults? And especially because I don't think that you need to modify your language for an 18-year-old or a 20-year-old or a 24-year-old the way that you would might need to for somebody who's in high school or whatnot. So yes, I could go on and on about this whole thing, and I think that there are layers to it. I understand why people would want sort of this category as an ease of use thing to find like stories about young people, but also they're banging. But I think that it brings so many other things up that it is tricky to sort of talk about. Disability rep felt dependent on ignoring and overcoming her symptoms rather than actually being empowered within the bounds of her disability. So I personally did enjoy the rep. Yes, that was very succinct. I feel like I went on forever, but yes. Some elements of the rep that I enjoyed, but overall the messaging and tone felt icky and ableist to me. But I'm only one person, plus one. We're two people. I feel some people overact in negative reviews of their fave because they take it as a personal attack. That is absolutely right. People make favorites part of their identity. And I think with this one specifically, there were a lot of people who were like, because there were arcs that gave like advanced praise. And so when like the negative stuff started to trickle in, I understand that sort of defensiveness to be like, well, I liked it, right? Because if people are saying where, I got a lot of comments that were like, finally, you're honest. And I don't think that's fair. I think the people who liked it honestly liked it. And so to say that they were like lying or anything like that, I think is like, I understand that sort of defensiveness to be like, yo, I just like this or whatnot. But that I do agree that like when you really really enjoy something and you start to like make it part of your identity, it can be very difficult to like process negative things about it. I also don't know how the series is gonna be 5 books. Apparently, they're all plotted to what? What the heck? I don't know. Despite flying nowhere near close to the sun, I predict Fourth Wing 2, the wings will still melt and crash and burn. Uh, every time I see people be like, IDK, how Violet is going to forgive Zayden for what he did, it makes me roll my eyes so hard. She's going to forgive him in the first 20% of the second book and then bang. Hello, you caught a live. You caught me 2 hours into a live. I mean, if people are still here, I'm going to keep talking. Feel free to drop off, join in as you please. If you're watching this on like repeat, just speed it up, put me up to 2 speed. We're going to keep going here. I think I caught up on the comments. Yay. Okay. Let's see. Thank you for your response. That was helpful. I think new adult makes more sense in the context of romance, but it fails when applied to genres like science fiction and fantasy. New adult as a category definitely makes sense to me when talking specifically about contemporary fiction, but I don't get it as much for spec fic. Uh, uh, um, Back when New Adult was born, the book that epitomized it was Easy by Tamara Weber. In a nutshell, college age, new job, first experiences kind of stories, darker, more graphic sex, and heavier topics. Before I sleep, fair. It's 3 a.m., so fair. Is there a book that this year you liked, but that generally hasn't been popular? Oh, let me see. I do have my reading spreadsheet up. Again, I haven't had a super great reading year. Um, I've been rereading a lot of things just because of like mental health reasons or whatnot. So a lot of things that you guys already know that I love. Um, mm, mm, let's see. Okay, this one isn't one that not that it wasn't popular, but that like people really, really didn't like it, and I thought it was okay. It's The Cartographers by Peng Shepherd. People really disliked that book, and I gave it like a solid 3.5 or 4 out of 5 stars, and I had a good time reading it. It was one of those like stories where yes, like the magic was a little vibey, and like you couldn't really like if you started to think about the logistics of it too much, then it started to kind of fall apart, but that works for me when the like magic is like symbolic. When it's there's some other work that the magic is doing or whatever other element of the story where it feels like thematic, where it feels symbolic. So you're supposed to understand that magic means like this thing here. So it's not a hard magic system. It's not meant to be like scrutinized and you understand how all of the mechanics work. And that's what like the magic in the cartographers felt like to me, where all of this stuff about like travel and maps and getting to places that you hold dear, like all of that was super thematic and symbolic. So I didn't really care that like it didn't make sense how they were traveling from place to place. There were things like I wish it were a little tighter. I wish that like it were a little shorter and things like came together more easily. But I think it was a worthwhile read and it made me feel things and I like was thinking about it afterwards. So every time like I come across a review and people are hating on it, I'm like, oh, fair. But it's one if you do like theme heavy sort of work, and if you like weird sort of books, then I would say maybe give it a try. Yeah, thank you for being here for so long. Yes, yes, yes. I really think the reason this is categorized as new adults is so it hits romance readers who recognize new adult as a subgenre of romance. That's really interesting. And yet, I don't know how much it was like purposeful that new adult, like at the beginning when it was like first becoming a thing, that it was like geared towards romance. I think that's what it became very quickly because, like, the whole, I don't know, one of the main sort of things that you can do now that it's new adult is insert sex. So there was a lot of like, well, this all has sex scenes, right? And so it was like, okay, this is all romance. And that's kind of like the rise and fall of new adult very quickly, even though we kind of see it trying to make like, push forward or whatnot. Um, Queen's Thief enthusiasm. Okay, okay. I think that we can move on from Fourth Wing as the worst book that I read this year. You know, Fourth Wing number 2. See you in November. Okay, fave new author. I always struggle with this question year over year because for me, like a favorite author is definitely somebody that I've read multiple books from. So it's hard for me to be like, this is a favorite new author if I've only read one thing. But I have now read multiple things from T. Kingfisher, and I think that she has become like a new favorite author. I have not read any of her horror because, again, I am not a horror girly, but I've now read Sword Heart. I've read Nettle and Bone. I've read the Baker's Guide to something or other. It's been 2 hours. Please forgive my memory. And I really, really enjoyed all three of those. So I'm having a good time exploring her fantasy. And I think like I'm going to read her backlist. I'm going to dabble maybe in like A House with Good Bones, which feels like gothic horror adjacent, so maybe I can do that one. But as T. Kingfisher continues to publish things, I'm going to be like there, chomping at the bit. So super excited that this has been like my, I think I read Nettle and Bone at the end of last year. So over the last year or so, I've been discovering Kingfisher's fantasy, and I've been having a great time. A Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking. Thank you very much. um, unrelated, but am I making a BNF vlog? I started a BookNet Fest vlog, and I've got like all of the cute, super cute footage at the beginning. But when I'm at the event, like I just am go, go, go. I don't have anything from during the event. I don't have myself on any of the panels that I moderated. I don't even have pictures of myself moderating panels. And so it's just like introduction and then nothing. I think I might do like a sit down wrap up and just talk a little bit about the experience and like maybe cut in some of the footage I did manage to take, but we shall see. A full vlog though, no, couldn't be me. Favorite new author for you guys? Becky Chambers, we have. I haven't finished the sequel to The Blood Trials, but I'm hoping N.E. Davenport. Amazing. I love T. Kingfisher. I don't always give her 5 stars, but I do always have a great time. My faves are Minor Mage and also Brioni and Roses, but it's a close call. I agree. I gave Nettle and Bone, I think, 4 stars, and the Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking, I also think I gave 4 stars. Sword Heart was like 4.5 stars. So these aren't like perfect books for me always, but they're just so enjoyable, and there's so many elements that I really, really like just find entertaining from her fantasies. So some of my like favorite authors are authors that like I don't always love their books, but I'm going to try it every time because they're like there's something about it. Like off the top of my head, Patrick Ness is one of those people that like some of his books just do not land for me, but I'm going to read it every time because his concepts are so like, I don't know, they call to me. And when Patrick Ness lands for me, oh man, it's really, really good. And so I'm willing to take like the stumbles, and I still consider him one of like my favorite authors because there is that like whatever you write, I'm going to read. So I just found out that T. Kingfisher is my youngest favorite. Like your youngest, like your kids. Yes, Ursula Vernon is when she's writing. T. Kingfisher is her pen name when she's writing like fantasy and horror. Yes, a lot of love. My new favorite author is Hannah Witten. I read the first book in her series. I haven't read the second one. I think I give the first book like 3 stars, and I was curious to keep reading. So. Hanif Adurakib, yes, or Rebecca Ross. Rebecca Ross is someone I can see being on this list next year because I'm enjoying Divine Rivals, and I'm kind of like, I need to read more from Rebecca Ross. Erin Morgenstern, always a good choice. I love Night Circus. I want to reread Starless Sea because I didn't love it as much as Night Circus, but I feel like on reread I could appreciate it a lot more. Yeah, Jessie, amazing. No new favorite author, rough reading year, but Megan Giddings has potential if I like her other book. Agreed. I do have That Woman Could Fly on audiobook, so it's another one that I want to get to because I loved Lakewood. Benjamin Alita Sands. I went through a whole Benjamin Alita Sands like period. I read Imperfect Light, and man, it was a bunch of them. It's now been years. I also read Aristotle and Dante. Imperfect Light was like one of my favorite books in the year that I read it. But I have a hard time like recommending it now because I read it so many years ago, and I don't know. It is like very dark and very heavy. So I would want to like reread it before really making an opinion on it. But yes, when I discovered Alita Sands, I went through a whole phase of just like reading as much of his work as I could. Megan O'Keefe, Rebecca Ross, Supremacy. I've been devouring A River Enchanted. I own that one from Book of the Month, so that will probably be my next one as well. Nino Cipri and Sabrina Imbler. Sabrina Imbler is on this list. Later on, we're almost there to the end. I'm so happy everyone is liking Rebecca Ross. This affirms my deep love of her work. Niveau and Roshni Choksi. I don't have a new author, but I like the audio narrator Peter Hosking. Oh, that's awesome. I never have heard of this narrator, but I love when I've heard a narrator like enough times that I like, I don't know, start to recognize them and like make note of it. So I love that. Mm-mm. Uh, Jen Lyons. I read Jessica John's debut, Bad Cree, and it stuck with me. So I'm looking forward to whatever she publishes next. Maybe a new fave. Amazing. This feeds right into a book that made me happy. I read Sword Heart this year, and it made me so, so happy. I read it sometime after Legends and Lattes, and I was like, this is what I want my cozy fantasy to be, because it's still, I don't know, it had stakes for our characters, but it was like high stakes for our characters, but they were still like kind of low stakes for us, the reader. The characters themselves felt fully fleshed out. I enjoyed the relationship between the characters. Like it felt so much more realized, fully realized than Legends and Lattes. So it was like a nice bounce back of like, okay, no, I can like cozy fantasy. This is just like more in my lane, something that feels a little like less vibey and just like go with it and feels more well built. I gave this 4.5 out of 5 stars. My only like one complaint was a little bit of the repetition, especially around the characterization of the main character, like some of the ways that she's described and we're told kind of over and over again, that some of the ways that she is, I think, could have been tightened, but I really, really enjoyed this one. So book that made me happy. You guys can tell me any books that made you happy as well, and I'm going to move along to a second pick while you guys are telling me about books that made you happy. This is a reread, which I was trying to avoid on this list, but I put it on here just to say that I did this reread as part of like a project with Kara from Wild Book Garden, and we did a live show for each and every one of the books, and I loved that project so much. If you've read these books, if you've ever thought about reading these books, and you check out those live shows, I think they're so interesting. Well done. We have great conversation. We're crying by the end of it because these books are so beautiful. I will forever and ever and ever love these books. They're some of my favorite. And anytime I have the opportunity to talk about them, it just makes me so happy. And Kara really loved them. So that made me even more happy. So if you haven't checked out that project, that's my little plug, mostly because it made me so happy to do it. When she asked me, I was like, yes, absolutely. And I'm still like, okay, who can I read this with next? What's the next time that I can reread this and buddy read this? Let's see. Here's Amina Al Sarafi showing up again as a book that made Dee Dee so happy. I love a badass older lady protagonist, and the trans storyline delighted me so much. The Drowned Woods by Emily Lloyd Jones. I was a little worried because I read and loved The Bone Houses a while ago, but this book was so good. The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches was also one that made me incredibly happy. Another one where I'm like, yes, I can enjoy cozy fantasy because that one worked for me as well. The Girl Who Circumnavigated Fairyland is wonderful. I agree. Remarkably Bright Creatures, super heartwarming. The Witch King made me very happy. I know it hasn't been popular, but it was perfect for me in that moment. Hen Fever. It's a sapphic historical romance novella about two people competing in the annual chicken show. Stop. I love it already. That is so fun. Hen Fever. Amazing. The Fairyland series. I love that. And Amina Al Sarafi, another one. The Downhounds. Kind of messy at times, but wild biopunk SFF with queer pirates. So fast paced and fun. I tried Fairyland this year, but wasn't in the mood. I want to try again in the fall. You definitely have to be in the mood for like a lot. It's like very descriptive. It is very earnest. So I totally get it. It is like a fairy tale. So you definitely have to be in the mood, but also I'm always in the mood for Fairyland. Pride and Prejudice, that is so exciting. It's my best friend's favorite book, so it made me happy to talk about it with her. I love Pride and Prejudice. I hope you enjoyed it too. Nicole and I talk about it all the time. We've each read it like so many times, and every time we reread it, we just have more to talk about. So Let's see, The Lives of Puppets, perfect mix of cozy and stakes combined with really well written adult humor that made me laugh out loud. Fell in love with it the first couple of pages. Emily Wilde made me happy. Take a hint, Danny Brown. Sure. Yes, that is a ton of fun. The Queer Principles of Kit Webb is my most recent Just Made Me Happy book. A dandy and a thief do crime and try to right injustice in Georgian era England. The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches for me too. Amazing. I just reading all of these things that made you happy just made me feel warm inside. Thank you for sharing. So a book that made me cry. That's going to be Before I Let Go by Kennedy Ryan. This is an adult romance and it is a second chance romance. It's about a couple that got divorced and they've been divorced for like a year now. And so it's like dealing a lot with like still the aftermath of the divorce and like you don't know why they got divorced at first, so you're slowly figuring that out, but also like he is moving on and so she's kind of having to deal with that and also like kind of encountering her own lingering feelings for this man who was her husband. And it's just so, I don't know, it's so heavy. It like hit me right. I was stressed, even though I knew it was a romance and I was going to get a happily ever after. I literally had to go to the end of the book and read the prologue to be like, okay, they're happy, and go back because it was just so effective in all of its explorations of these heavy themes. And I really enjoyed the characters. So I was invested in them and like in them getting their life together and getting their second chance. I will say this until I am blue in the face, but Kennedy Ryan is doing what Colleen Hoover thinks she's doing. Kennedy Ryan is doing what Colleen Hoover wishes she could do. She's writing really complex romances that take on these like darker subject matters, but she's doing it with a lot of respect. This book portrayed therapy in such a positive light. Everyone went to therapy and it was so great. It was like a thing where they're like, nope, we're going to fix it. And we're going to get it together. So that was really well done. It's just, I don't know. I was super impressed with this. And yes, I definitely did cry. Another one that made me cry, I'll go through it really quick, is How Far the Light Reaches by Sabrina Imbler. This is a nonfiction book, and it is like a kind of collection of essays where Sabrina takes like a sea creature, like a deep sea creature, and talks about it, and then pairs it with an essay about something from their own life. And it is a lot about like queer community, about coming out, about their own experiences with like rape and sexual assault. So it has again some like deep and dark subject matters, but it's paired with this like exploration and this wonder of like the ocean in a way that was really, really interesting. But and the language that they use to sort of come together with like their own experiences, but also with like this scientific thing, and the way that they make those connections is super interesting, but also really emotional. Like I was reading this with my heart in my throat at points. So if you enjoy nonfiction, I highly recommend. And I think that this was super effective. So let's see. People are sending me books that made them cry. Oh, I was like Agnes and the Hitman, but that is still silly, goofy fun, not crying. Broken by Jenny Lawson had me laughing out loud. Okay, these are still happy ones. I have too many books that make me cry. My recent ones are Divine Rivals and Magic Braids. I also like am a crier generally, so we're not like I cry at a ton of books, but these are two that when I thought about my reading experience, it was definitely like, oh, cry. The Winners by Bachman made me cry. But since January, I'm getting a little more negative in my feels, with it being like it's like getting negative in your feelings. Sure. With it being a bit trauma pornish. That's fair. Yes, and trauma porn will absolutely make you cry. That is true. Nothing has made me cry yet this year. Oh my goodness, could not be me. I cry all the time. Uh, the first book I read this year was The Song of Achilles. I was struggling to see the words because of all of the sobbing. Fair. I have not read that book, but I feel like I know, I know. Um, Genderqueer felt very validating and made me very emotional. In the Night of Memory made me cry, and I cried talking about it. Let's see what's here. I think my only one this year was Nothing But the Rain by Naomi Salmon. It's about a town where the rain makes people forget things. Oh gosh, and you see, I was just reading the description. I was already like frowning. I can see why that would make you cry. I read We Deserve Monuments this year and it made me cry, but also was maybe the first novel I read that references how the pandemic affected school everyday life. I really, really enjoyed We Deserve Monuments. I also was super emotional reading it because, in addition to like all of the things about like her, the queer rep in it and the pandemic, there was also just a lot about like family and generational trauma and like the histories of families that I thought was just so, so well explored. And even on top of all of that, there was like a lightness and like a hope and a happiness that was also in this book that I thought was just incredibly well done. So, yes, big cry book, big cry book. Radiant Fugitives, Empress of Salt and Fortune, How Far the Light Reaches also made me cry. Traveling Cat Chronicles made me cry like a damn baby. Always the Almost and Love Theoretically by Ali Hazelwood made me cry. How Far the Light Reaches goes onto your TBR. I hope you enjoy it. I really, really hope you do. I think you will, because it's a good one. A Psalm for the Wild Built, the commentary on burnout and compassion fatigue hit me really hard. That is primarily why I really, really enjoyed that book. I've heard criticisms of it that I'm like, yes, fair, but it hit me emotionally because of all of the commentary on burnout. Uh, yes, especially like when I read it, and recently I was just like in exactly that place where I was like, yes, all of this. The Silence That Binds Us. It went more in depth than I thought it would, and the scene where the main character breaks down at the place her brother killed himself wrecked me. Heaven, Bullying really hit home. Care Work, Dreaming Disability Justice made me happy and cry, both happy and anger. We Deserve Monuments has my whole heart. Love to see love for We Deserve Monuments. The Locked Tombs, and even knowing what happens, I sob. Bone by Jeff Smith made me cry because I'm reading this 1,300 page bind up of all 9 volumes of the graphic novel, and I grew so attached to the characters in ways that I haven't felt since childhood. Amazing. Savage Crowns by Matt Wallace. Thank you for sharing. And we're almost done. Okay. So the last question is about books that are on your TBR that you want to read before the end of the year. So we just had somebody mention the Locked Tomb series. I am going to read Gideon the Ninth before the end of the year. I keep saying this and I keep starting it and I don't get far. There's a whole like Locked Tomb channel on my Discord, and like people keep reading, people keep finishing, people keep leaving me in the dust, and I still have not read this book that I was commissioned to read. So I like need to read it. I don't know. I have to like sit down and concentrate because there's so much going on immediately in this book that I feel like I need to focus. But before the end of the year, you guys, hold me to this. I'm going to finish Gideon the Ninth. I also have the second Witchlings book, which just was my choice for a book that made me happy last year. So I'm looking forward to saving that maybe like right after Gideon the Ninth, like as a reset. I think that would be good. Grey Mist Fair by Francesca Zappia. I really enjoyed Francesca and what is the thing? Who and Her Monsters? Francesca's the name of the author. Oh gosh. Anyways, I enjoyed that book. And then I read Cats and Jammer, and that book still haunts me, honestly. I was wrecked by that book. I have so many, like, I've never been able to talk to anybody about that book, so I don't even know how to like react by it. So I've been really interested in Zappia's like work, and she has a new one coming out later this year, Grey Mist Fair, and she was kind enough to send it to me. So I have a copy of that. And then I got Warrior Girl on Earth, which is the second book by Angeline Booley. I really, really loved Firekeeper's Daughter, and so this one was sent to me by the publisher. So these are 4 books that I'm like, come on, you have 6 months. You can do this before the end of the year. And then on top of those books, these are books that I'm like, I want to read just because I want to read them. I do have some project reading. So I'm reading through A Court of Thorns and Roses. This is a reread for me, and I'm doing chapter by chapter recaps as Patreon exclusives. I'm writing chapter 18 right now, so I'm about like 40% of the way through the book, and I feel like that it means that I can finish this project off in this year. I'll also be reading all of the Hugo nominated novels and novellas once they're announced, if they haven't been announced, whatever's happening there. So I will be doing that. And my next hate read is going to be Haunting Adeline. So I've already started doing that. Like I'm in the first couple of pages and I'm already like, oh no. So that's going to be the next hate read sort of review of a popular work, reviewing a TikTok book sort of thing that I've been doing. So you guys can expect that. I don't even know when. We'll see how long it takes me to get through that. And then I started a whole project where I was reading through Victoria Schwab's work, and I read one book, and it was The Near Witch, and I really didn't like him, and so I just stopped that project. But I don't want to stop it. I want to keep reading. So The Archived is next. So I'm going to try and get part 2 of this project out this year, where I read the next book. I'm doing it in publication order, so The Archived will be the next one. So yeah, that is like what's on the horizon for me in terms of books I want to read and project reading. And that's the end. We did the whole tag. It only took me 2.5 hours. But yeah, we did it. And Eliza and her monsters. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I always say Francesca and her monsters, and it's not that. But yes, Eliza and her monsters. I really enjoyed that book. And yeah, Cats and Jammer was an experience. So I'm looking forward to Grimmest Bear. Persuasion. Yeah, Amy, I got you. I love Persuasion. I love Persuasion so much. If you want to read it together, let's do it, because I love that book. I got dogpiled in Discord for saying I didn't like Gideon the Ninth. Not my server, but I don't know. They might no. they wouldn't dogpile you, but a lot of people would be like, because we have a lot of fans of Gideon the Ninth. I think that that's also part of it. Like, not that I feel pressure to enjoy it, but I really, really want to love it as much as everybody else does. So, they just, that's a thing. Let's see what else we got here. Uh, 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 uh. Yes, yes, yes. Let's see. Any other questions before we wrap up? It's been a while. Thank you guys for, if you joined in recently, if you've been here since the beginning, for joining in on this. I will definitely give you my opinion on Haunting Adeline. Adeline, I don't know why I can't say that, but I'm also just like not able to say words right now. But it's going to be bad. I can already tell it's going to be bad because I'm only a couple pages in and it's bad. So I think that I've been like dancing around, like wanting to have a conversation about like dark romance in general, and just like that whole thing happening on TikTok. And not that dark romance is bad, but sort of like the conversations that community sort of refuses to have, especially around things like content warnings. And the book actually opens up with an author's note that it's like, all of the things in here are not anti-Semitic. Swearsies. So I, like, from the beginning, I was like, what? What do you mean? Like, if you have to have an author's note to be like, I swear this is not anti-Semitic, like maybe it is. Like, I don't know. That felt really off to me. So it's just like already so many red flags. So stay tuned. I will be sure to let you know how terrible that book is. When like 3 to 6 business weeks. I'd like to get through Six of Crows. I just keep putting it down and not finishing. A fair. 5th season, Cemetery Boys, House in the Cerulean Sea. Thank you guys for joining. Let's see, priorities. Let's see. Yes, our Kitty Martine, please. That duology is so great. It's 3:30 a.m. and this has kept me very awake. Thank you for being here. Thank you. Have a great week. This was so fun. Yeah, a good way to do a tag. Great. That's awesome. I think I will keep that in mind for like future tags and things that I want to do. And generally maybe like a once a month sort of like live, because this was fun. I'm very interested in that conversation. It's frustrating the refusal to talk about it. I agree. The one time that I tried to make a video about it, I got like super shut down. They like came for my neck. But I feel like talking about it through a book might be a nice, easier way to sort of like start that conversation. I haven't read the Inheritance trilogy. I read something by N.K. Jemisin for House Salt, but I think was it the first in that series? I don't know. If it was, I gave it like 3.5 stars. I didn't like it as much as the fifth season. The Locked Tomb are like Marmite books. There's no shame if they don't work for you. That's fair. Uh, I'd love to be a part of a live chat discussing dark romance because to the fervor with which the fans protect it. I agree. That would be an excellent live show. You know what? Let's think about this because I think that it would be really interesting to get like a panel of people maybe and to like talk about it from different angles about like what dark romance is and content warnings and trigger warnings and what makes it romance either the elements that make it dark versus just like romance as well. So yeah, that would be really fun. Thank you for being here. Yes, Natalie was at Booknet Fest, and we talked about this book at Booknet Fest, and she was telling me how much she was struggling with it, and I was like, yeah, that's my next book. And then I saw that she had the 2 hour long video. I haven't watched it yet. I won't watch it until I read and do my review, just because I want to keep things kind of separate. But I'm really excited to like reward myself when I'm done reading and doing my own review with her 2 hour long video. Yes, I have read 100,000 Kingdoms. Thank you. You guys have been helping me out so much in the comments. I did. I gave it like 3.5 out of 5 stars. If I had to like explain any of the things in that book though, completely gone from my memory and it's only been like a few months. So, yes, let's do it. Crystal, you want to be on this panel? Thank you for being here. Thank you guys for being here. All right, I think that will wrap it up. And I will see you guys soon. And I will announce for whatever is next on this live on my Twitter. So, yeah, talk to you guys soon. Bye.